Hello, my dears. This video is released thanks to your support. This funny story begins with the fact that the city hosted international competitions, where the players were heated to the limit. The favorites of this tournament were naturally Topson and Sekai, who competed against each other. However, the main character also took part in the competition, but he suddenly fell asleep. After some time, the guy woke up and remembered that he was at a tournament. The young man played under the pseudonym of a fool, and no one took him seriously. Looking at the time, Chunyi realized that he had slept for an hour, and his opponents had not made much progress in the game. For him, this video game was too easy, and he decided to demonstrate this. At the same time, the teenager used less popular techniques and still achieved success. By destroying many monsters and bosses, Chunyi gradually increased the percentage of the game's completion, which began to grow rapidly, and as a result, everyone began to closely watch the fool's game. A few minutes later, completed the game 100% faster than the others and won the competition. Where he was presented with a cup as a gift, most of the spectators were shocked by the outcome of the competition. The presenter, smiling broadly, congratulated the guy on his victory and encouraged him to say a few words. Took the microphone and said that this video game was too easy, and he didn't even feel the tournament participants. He added that he even managed to get some sleep and pass the test, which again shocked the crowd. However, there were also those who admired the young man, saying that there was even a special game that was created for him. Finally, Chunyi went home to have a good rest and think about what to do next. Everyone called him the god of video games, but in reality he wasn't very interested in them. While thinking about where he could find a more difficult game, the teenager did not notice how he fell asleep. Waking up a few hours later, he had a severe headache and got out of bed. But suddenly he saw unknown numbers in front of him. They seemed to hang in the air. Dumbfounded, Chunyi looked around and again looked at the incomprehensible number. At that moment, a slot machine literally appeared out of thin air behind him. The system informed the owner that he had the opportunity to play the lottery. The puzzled guy pulled the lever, not understanding where this game came from and what was going on. For a long time, images flashed before his eyes. He was in anticipation of another victory. After a couple of seconds, the machine produced 3 identical pictures, but nothing happened. Chunyi began to wait for the gift. Suddenly his hand glowed with magical flame, after which 3 stickers appeared in his palm, which the program reported. He looked at them and did not understand what to do with them and how to exchange them for a gift. Suddenly, the system notified that by sticking a sticker to a target, it will become invisible for 10 minutes. The young man soon assumed that he was inside some kind of video game. At this moment, a dialogue box popped up in front of him. Chunyi pressed the status button, where he was given information about him. The player was at the first level of character development. The shocked boy started calling his parents, but their numbers were unavailable. He could not understand who had drawn him into this game, and why even his friends' phone numbers were not working. A moment later, the program sent the owner his first task, and Chunyi began to read it. How did he know that he needed to go to the factory and solve the strange anomaly? He took the mission seriously because he didn't know what would happen if he failed. Having finally reached his destination, the teenager began to look around. At the same time, he understood that he had no weapons and could only use stickers. At that moment, a dog suddenly appeared in front of him and began barking at him. Then Chunyi came up with the idea to test the functionality of these stickers. Having stuck one on the dog, it suddenly disappeared, and also stuck an invisibility sticker on himself. Soon the guy went inside the abandoned factory to find out what was going on there. Descending into the dark basement, Chunyi turned on the flashlight he had accidentally brought with him. While looking around, the teenager suddenly came across something special. Taking a closer look, he realized that there was a man in front of him. The young man was carefully approaching his target. It turned out to be a young girl who was tied to one of the pillars. Then assumed that his mission was to save her, and he came even closer. But the extremely strange feeling, as if someone was playing with him, did not leave him. After all, everything indicated that this room would soon be filled with enemies. However, there was no one nearby except the young lady, so he thought that he shouldn't save her, since the one who tied up the girl would come running here in an instant. He headed in the opposite direction, but suddenly the girl attacked him with a knife. She struck him with a lightning strike in the back, and Chunyi suddenly woke up. Looking around, he realized that he was in his own apartment and calmed down. He naively believed that it was just a nightmare and that there was no game. But opening his palm, the young man saw those same invisibility stickers and froze in place. Realizing that this was all really happening and that he was not sleeping, he was again overcome by a strange feeling. Looking up, he noticed the same incomprehensible numbers and thought about it. But this time, the number 2 was glowing instead of the number 3, and Chunyi couldn't understand what they meant. The system immediately gave him a map showing an abandoned factory. The mission in turn remained the same. The teenager realized with horror that he was in a game. Since the main character had spent 1 life, he took the task more seriously. Having collected his thoughts, the young player once again set off on a mission. But suddenly it dawned on him that the 3 had changed to a 2 due to his death in the game. But the question was, what would happen if E spent all his lives? Would he die or return to the real world? Chunyi thought for a long time about this game and what caused him to die last time, remembering only the touch on his neck, which meant that someone attacked him from behind. The teenager understood perfectly well that he had missed something very important, and that he should pay more attention to the details. At that moment, his doorbell suddenly rang, and the surprised guy headed for the exit. Opening the doors, the stunned E saw a young girl on the threshold, who immediately smiled. He remembered her. It was a college student named Yan. Not long ago, she borrowed 500 yuan from him but never returned it. Suddenly, the girl asked him to lend her some money. Chunyi did not refuse her, realizing that the characters were taken from the real world. This meant that the game was connected to his life, but E had no idea how or why he got into it. After which, the teenager kindly transferred those same 500 yuan to Key's card. The young lady began to thank him and promised to return everything by the end of this month. He thought that this was some kind of hint, but he couldn't figure it out. But suddenly, a measurement scale appeared on Yan's back, where it was written that her attitude towards the guy had increased by 10 points. Chunyi was shocked, assuming that this game was a simulation of relationships with girls. After all, he was never popular among the female sex and did not have relationships with them. Meanwhile, the system reminded the teenager of the mission, and the young man immediately got ready to go to the factory. But this time E was much more careful and constantly looked around. Entering the vast territory of the factory, Chunyi slowly moved towards the basement. As before, the teenager went down the stairs and entered a familiar room, where the same picture appeared before him, a stranger tied to a column. The guy began to carefully examine the room, realizing that he had missed some details. Part of the mission was to rescue an unknown lady and thereby win her over to the young man. As such, Chunyi carefully approached her from behind to free her and asked if she was okay. The girl, in turn, did not answer. The guy continued to untie her hands, after which she unexpectedly thanked the young man and stated that she was fine. But before that, 2 guys she didn't know broke into her house and dragged her away. E understood that he couldn't cope with them without weapons. And besides, it was unknown what skills they had. So Chunyi decided to use the invisibility stickers to save the hostage. But suddenly, Yezi tripped and crashed into the protagonist, who dropped his stickers. When he bent down to pick them up, the mice grabbed the magic items and ran away. Also, unknown voices were heard from the stairs. E was in shock and did not know what to do. Thinking that he had lost again, Yezi suddenly clung to him and apologized for her clumsiness. Chunyi began to think, because he didn't have any stickers, and he needed to hide quickly. A few seconds later, 2 unknown individuals came down the stairs and went into the basement. The girl continued to apologize to the guy and say that she didn't do it on purpose. The teenager immediately covered her mouth with his hand and urged her to remain silent for at least a while. He added that no matter what happened, she was obliged to keep her mouth shut and not make any sounds. The young man also asked her to get off of him, and the perplexed Yezi immediately slid off of Ye. Then Chunyi peered out from behind the column to see what the bandits were doing. At the same time, the guy began to look around and suddenly noticed the suitcase. The teenager took Yezi's hand and said that they needed to get to the box unnoticed. Meanwhile, unknown persons examined the dark room with a flashlight and were shocked. After all, they discovered that the girl was missing and went into a rage, realizing that they urgently needed to find her. The other one began to blame his accomplice for everything, saying that she shouldn't have been kidnapped at all. By that time, the teenager and Yezi were already inside the huge suitcase. But the girl began to tremble from fear and once again pressed herself against the young man. He urged her not to be afraid and told her that she didn't need to cling to him so tightly. However, the girl did not listen to him and continued to be sarcastic, which led to a characteristic noise. The bandits in turn saw how the box began to move, making sounds. The protagonist immediately covered Yezi's mouth and his own with his hand just in case. Meanwhile, the kidnappers slowly approached the box and shone a flashlight on it. Chunyi knew that he would still have to face the bandits, but this time it wouldn't be in a video game. However, at the most crucial moment, a mouse with magic stickers ran out from behind the box. Upon seeing her, the kidnappers came to the general conclusion that there was no one there, and that the girl had escaped. In connection with this, they hurried to discuss the imminent move and went to pack their things. Finally, when they left the confines of the basement, E opened the box and climbed out, saying that the mouse literally saved their lives and now they are safe. But Yezi was scared to death. The young man tried to calm her down and said that she could go out since they had left. After which, Chunyi hurried to pick up his invisibility stickers from the floor. Then the teenager began to think about how they could get out of the abandoned factory. But suddenly the young lady grabbed the guy's hand and asked what he had in his hands. He showed her the stickers and said they were just bandages. Yezi was surprised. Then the girl asked again why he needed them and where he was always rushing to. Chunyi began to mumble incoherently under his breath, after which he declared that he had cut his hand. Then he grabbed her hand again and pulled her along with him, saying that they needed to get out of here. Yezi naturally did not resist and followed after her savior. A couple of minutes later, they found themselves on the street, where E took a deep breath, rejoicing in the freedom. Suddenly, the girl asked the teenager what his name was, and the guy smiled, after which he gave his name, and the young lady wondered about its origin. At the same time, Yezi noted that he really did have a very strange name. This was clearly not the remark that Chunyi was expecting from her. Then the girl also smiled and extended her hand to the young man, and E reciprocated her feelings. This person seemed strange to him because she was not at all happy about her liberation. Suddenly, the system informed the owner that the mission was still not completed, but he had saved the hostage. Yezi in turn asked why he actually came here, believing that the teenager was from the police. E laughed and asked her a counter question. Did he really look so much like a law enforcement officer? The girl suddenly approached him and said that he didn't smell like the police, which again seemed strange to him, and Chunyi asked where her house was to take the girl there. However, Yezi refused to say where she lived, and the teenager continued to be surprised. The young lady said that she was terribly bored at home, and therefore she was in no hurry to go there, adding that she found it much more interesting to spend time with him, especially since she liked him. E, in turn, tried to concentrate on the mission and drive away bad thoughts. In this regard, he said that in that case she would have to go to the police station, but she again refused him. Then she finally agreed to let the guy take her home, which made Chunyi extremely happy. After a certain amount of time, they came to a luxurious mansion, which was Yezi's house. The stunned young man asked if she really lived here, and the girl answered in the affirmative. He asked again if she worked as a maid, since that was exactly how the girl was dressed, but the young lady replied that it was just her hobby. After which she approached the front door and shyly asked if he wanted to come to her house. Since there are no parents now, naturally the teenager refused the offer. At the same time, E gave her his phone number and urged her to contact him for help. Then Chunyi rushed off in an unknown direction and said goodbye to Yezi. Unexpectedly, the girl said that in fact he was not as interesting as she had initially thought. The puzzled guy asked what exactly she meant, but the girl still didn't answer. It was unclear why the task had not yet been completed, since he had saved the hostage. It suddenly dawned on him that the hostages could be the two who were planning to escape from the factory. In addition, there were 2 unsolved mysteries left on the plant's territory, which raised questions. He also never understood how he lost his life while he was at the factory. In connection with this, he decided to go home and then find out everything. But Yezi was unhappy with this result. The girl watched the teenager closely, holding a knife behind her back. Having had a good night's sleep, the next day the main character went to the factory again. He knew that the area was abandoned and there was no one there, no kidnappers, no hostages. Chunyi decided to go around the entire perimeter and examine everything properly. Soon he entered an unknown room, where he saw human remains and pools of blood, which put him into a state of shock. At the same time, there was a terrible smell in the room, and the young man immediately covered his nose with his hand. Finding nothing else, E hurried to leave the location. As a result, he returned home in a not very good condition and headed to bed. As soon as Chunyi got to the bed, the boy immediately fell asleep as he was very exhausted. However, at exactly 9 in the morning, the alarm went off and E reached out to turn it off. Finding that it was morning again, the young man got out of bed and went to the bathroom. But he was stopped by a suddenly appearing slot machine, where he had to play the lottery again. The guy realized that here, just like in the game, you can get a random reward every day. After a few seconds, 3 sports glasses appeared on the screen and Chunyi was surprised. Soon the system informed the owner that with the help of these glasses he could see clues. He twirled the glasses in his hands for a long time, carefully examining their design. And as soon as he put them on, Kay rang the doorbell, and the young man in turn recognized her voice. Assuming that she would want to borrow money from him again, Chunyi headed for the door. Taking a closer look, Ye found that he could literally see through the door where Yan stood. At the same time, with the help of special glasses, he was able to read the girl's thoughts. Thus, the main character acquired a rather useful device. In connection with this, he decided to go to the plant again to find clues that he could not see before. Putting on his glasses, the teenager rushed towards the task and constantly looked around. When he reached a certain door, Chunyi suddenly discovered unknown people behind it. With the help of special glasses, having collected his thoughts, E hurried to go inside. As soon as the young man opened the door to the room, he immediately ordered everyone to remain in their places. But a second later, he saw in front of him not bandits, but hostages. The girl and the boy were tied up, and underneath them shone a bloody sign of sacrifice. The stunned teenager realized that there were some Satanists here. At that moment, he heard screams from the corridor and immediately headed for the exit. Before this, the guy scanned the wall behind which there were several people. They fought among themselves, and Chunyi finally decided to show his heroic qualities. But after a couple of seconds, some thug broke through the wall and literally flew into the room. At the same time, the unknown person was badly beaten, and his wounds were bleeding. E could not understand what was happening. Raising his head to the hole in the wall, he expected to see a brutal killer. But in the middle of the scattered corpses of the bandits stood Yezi, which made Chunyi perplexed. Realizing that it was her, the guy seemed to be speechless and just looked at the girl. Taking off his glasses, he could no longer see the young lady in front of him and was horrified. Suddenly, Yezi directed her menacing gaze at him, and the young man stepped back. Her knives were covered in blood, which only confirmed the shocked teenager's suspicions. The girl continued to look at him and, suddenly smiling, asked if he had really decided to come back. Frightened, he asked her a counter-question about what she was doing there and why she came. Yezi sighed heavily and asked if he really still didn't understand anything. Chunyi replied that he understood everything. He just couldn't believe that such a fragile girl had cut up so many people. The young lady confirmed his words and added that now his time had come. After which Yezi rushed towards Ye. The guy tried his best to calm her down. However, the distraught girl decided not to tire herself with conversations and got down to business. When the girl's knife was a few centimeters away from the main character, he felt a familiar feeling. A chilling feeling of steel and a sense of unexpected death, which is what happened just recently. Chunyi, in turn, tried to dodge the lightning-fast attacks of the enraged killer. Realizing that it was she who killed him the first time he came to this plant. Suddenly, Ye stopped and Yezi's knife froze a centimeter away from his neck. The young man asked if she wanted to repeat it. Having added that he knew it was she who killed him the first time, the young lady became thoughtful. Then she asked what last time meant, since he can't play resurrection. Chunyi stated that she should know what he was talking about since they had met before. Suddenly the girl laughed and noted that he was not really that boring. E caught himself thinking that for some reason she didn't want to let him go, but he wanted to kill her. However, Yezi again pointed her blade towards the boy, and Chunyi backed away. The girl, in turn, said that he could come up with something more interesting. The teenager asked her to put away her knife because he was very nervous about it. Then Yezi said that he had no more than 3 minutes to explain himself. E showed her the invisibility stickers and urged her to look at them more closely. Taking advantage of the moment, Chunyi put one of the patches on her hand. With that, he disappeared from her field of vision, and the stunned Yezi did not understand what was happening. Meanwhile, E hurried to slip out of the girl's hands and slowly moved to the side. The young lady began to search for the young man throughout the room, but could not find him anywhere. But at the very last moment she extended her hand with the knife, and the blade again ended up a centimeter from the guy's neck. After which the killer called on him to demonstrate all his abilities. Shocked, Chunyi couldn't understand what went wrong, since he had stuck the sticker on her, believing that the patch had an expiration date, or that Yezi had some special skills. The girl once again asked him if he had any more similar tricks in his arsenal. Ye replied with a trembling voice that there definitely should be. Then Yezi urged him to show them. The teenager decided to deceive the young killer and said that if she gave him a little time, he would definitely surprise her. But judging by the expression on the girl's face, the young man realized that she was not so easy to fool. At this moment, Yezi suddenly turned Chunyi towards her and said that she would show him something. Then she hugged E and asked if he wanted to have some fun. Using feminine tricks, she achieved her goal, and the guy literally melted. Embarrassed, Chunyi turned crimson and asked if she was serious. Yezi reiterated that he really had a unique scent, which was why she found him when he was invisible. Finally, E realized what had actually happened and why the sticker hadn't worked. Soon the girl became as close as possible to the young man and said that she had been looking for someone like him all her life. Chunyi held on with all his might, but he was unable to overcome himself and subsequently succumbed to the killer's influence. Just as they were about to kiss, something inexplicable happened. Yi felt a strange feeling, and Yezi immediately covered his mouth with her hand. The system immediately reported that the owner was parasitized, and the stunned teenager realized that she had fed him something. After which the young lady let go of the guy, and he instantly fell to the ground. At the same time, Chunyi experienced quite unpleasant changes in his body. Suddenly, his stomach began to hurt badly, causing the young man to literally cramp up. Yezi, in turn, put her foot on him and noted that he irritated her. He couldn't do anything. He was as if chained to the ground and couldn't feel his limbs. Suddenly, the killer put her toes in his mouth, which he did not expect. Then the smiling girl said that they had no hurry, which meant they could play a little. The bewildered Chunyi still couldn't do anything and simply watched what was happening. But after a couple of minutes, the pain in his body suddenly went away, and E began to breathe normally. At that moment, Yezi sat down on him and declared that he was now her man. The main character tried to get up, but the girl did not give him such an opportunity and asked what organization he was from. Extremely dissatisfied, Chunyi replied that he was not a member of any guild. Naturally, the young lady did not believe him and said that this could not be. After all, this is clearly not the first time he has come to the factory, which means that someone sent him here. E decided to surrender immediately, as he did not want to be subjected to excruciating torture. Moreover, he had one more life in reserve. Yezi in turn was surprised. Chunyi asked if she would let him go if he begged for mercy. The young lady smiled and replied that now she would definitely not let him go, and he was the first one to do so. The teenager realized with horror that the others had indeed been subjected to her horrific games. Suddenly the girl licked her lips and asked what the guy was thinking about now. The frightened young man did not know what to answer, as he was simply afraid of the bloodthirsty person. Yezi leaned towards him and said that for some reason she felt sorry to kill him now, and besides, he was funny. After which she ran her hand through his thick hair. E immediately asked who she was and what she was doing here. Then the girl said that they were shouting about some god, and she decided to play with them, but the game turned out to be boring. As it all led to multiple murders, Chunyi looked at the corpses of the kidnappers and realized that they were very unlucky to have run into her. But at the same time, he couldn't understand why she killed him the first time. But there was no point in asking, because her memories were empty. Yezi handed him a certain QR code and said that with its help he would be able to contact her, adding that when she texted him, he would have only 10 seconds to respond. Otherwise she will start calling him and eventually just beat him up. Soon the girl hurried to leave, advising him not to leave his phone anywhere so as not to miss her message, because the sweet boy could lose his life, and she said everything with a smile on her face, which literally made Ye's blood boil, but Chunyi finally recovered and freed the hostages, who were extremely grateful to him for this and rushed off in an unknown direction. Thus, the guy completed the mission and received the long-awaited reward in the form of another life and money. The system was quick to inform him of this, which was quite a useful gift. The main character also believed that he would be honored to increase his level, but he remained at the first stage. But at the same time, the program gave him access to a tree of special abilities and characteristics. For a long time, E could not decide on a choice, because strength and agility are very important, but the other attributes could not be ignored. As such, Chunyi decided to increase his charm by 5 points to make it easier for him to interact with girls. The young man naively believed that now there would be no end to beauties, but everything was not so simple. However, at the moment, this was all he cared about. E even planned to open his own harem in the game. But a moment later, he felt a heaviness in his body and extreme dizziness. The program immediately notified that with the increase in charm, strength, speed, and knowledge decreased, which left the guy perplexed, because he only just found out about it and might have acted differently. But it was too late. Chunyi was indignant about this for a long time, but eventually calmed down, after which he hurried to return home, as he was really very tired from the mission. At the same time, E noticed that the charm was not working, because while he was heading home, none of the girls paid attention to him. However, as soon as the young man opened the front door of his apartment, Kei called out to him. Of course, Chunyi understood perfectly well that she would ask him to borrow money again. Getting ahead of this situation, the teenager said that not long ago she had already borrowed 500 yuan from him. The stunned girl instantly blushed and stepped back. E was surprised. In fact, in the eyes of the female sex, the guy looked muscular and handsome. Yan literally couldn't gather her thoughts to continue the conversation. Then she suddenly suggested that he watch a movie that evening, and Chunyi was shocked. Suddenly, the girl approached him, and the young man turned burgundy from embarrassment. Confused, he didn't know what to say, but suddenly someone called out to him. The unknown girl claimed to be Key's husband, and Ye dared to touch her. Dumbfounded, Chunyi looked at the stranger once again, thinking that he was imagining things. But it really was a woman who, for some reason, called herself Yan's husband. As a result, Shang began to behave aggressively towards the main character, who was trying to understand what was going on. Then the girl dragged Kei along with her. Yan said that everything was not as Shang thought, but the young lady was not herself, and said that they wanted to watch a movie, and that says a lot. Chunyi found himself thinking that his charm had, after all, undergone changes for the better, which naturally had a positive effect on his mood. E was literally happy. But at that moment, Xiang threw an apple at him and began insulting him again, saying that as soon as he finished raising his restless wife, she would take on him. At the same time, the young man realized that for some reason the charm did not extend to all women. The next day, again at 9 in the morning, Chunyi woke up with a feeling of déjà vu. At that moment he realized that no matter what time he went to bed, he always woke up at 9 in the morning. Soon the guy went to the slot machine to try his luck and win a useful bonus. In the end, he won a rope, with the help of which he could get out in places where no one could see him. He was also fortunate enough to acquire a new mobile phone that could hack into equipment within range. Overall, the gifts were much more useful than the previous ones. E realized that this was not the limit. The system also gave the next task, where it was necessary to have dinner outside. While the mission's difficulty was higher than the previous one, Chunyi assumed that he would meet someone on the street. But the more difficult the tasks, the better the reward, and besides, E was really hungry. Walking to Manhwa Street with glasses on, the protagonist looked around. However, nothing suspicious happened, so Chunyi decided to go into the store and buy some noodles. When he entered the establishment, the guy asked the waitress to bring him one serving of noodles. 5 minutes later, Kay was heading towards him with a tray. The teenager was in shock. He in turn asked if she really worked here. The girl responded positively, stating that Shang also worked close to home, after which Yan began to apologize for yesterday's events, but Chunyi urged her not to dwell on it. Suddenly she asked the guy for help, and he thought it was all about money. But the young lady said that she didn't need money, and that the matter was completely different. Kay gave him some kind of amulet and asked him to give it to Xiang, since after yesterday she was ignoring her. Naturally, out of politeness, he agreed, especially since at that moment the system informed him that this was his mission. After a good dinner, the young man went outside, but this time everything seemed strange to him. Kay gave him the address of Xiang's work, and Chunyi went to the hotel-like establishment. As soon as he entered it, he was greeted by charming strangers. The girls literally swarmed around the guy, offering him a loyalty card. The young man politely declined, trying to control himself, then mentioned that he was looking for someone. A few seconds later, an unknown woman came out to him and gave him a list of all the beauties. At the same time, all the information and even photographs were collected about the young ladies. Shocked and red with embarrassment, Chunya suddenly closed the book, realizing that he needed to concentrate on the task at hand. After which he asked if Wei Xiang was here. The woman was surprised. Then she led him into a separate room and urged him to wait for his friend. The teenager sat down on the only bed in the room and waited for V to appear, realizing how the adult world is teeming with such things, which was fundamentally different from childhood. A moment later, Zhang appeared on the threshold and asked if the boy had been waiting for her. But when she recognized him as that very neighbor Yan, the girl became furious. When he started asking why he followed her and found out her place of work, Yi denied everything. He said that he didn't do anything like that and didn't even think about following her. At the same time, Chunyi was shocked by the fact that Wei was working in such a place, because he thought she was selling clothes. Shang in turn misunderstood everything and urged him to quickly end their meeting, adding that he would be pleased, but for that she needed to take the initiative into her own hands. Embarrassed, Yi said that he was there for a completely different reason and reached into his pocket. But at that moment, Wei unexpectedly kissed him, and the teenager forgot about everything in the world. But after a couple of seconds, she pushed him away from her and said that he didn't know how to kiss. In fact, this was Chunya's first kiss. Naturally, he couldn't admit it to her. Xiang in turn did not stop pressuring him, and eventually Ye succumbed to her influence. But after a certain time, his head suddenly started spinning. He could not understand what had happened. Looking at Wei, he discovered that there were 4 of them, and asked what was the matter. The girl answered that there were originally that many of them. After which, like snakes, they began to wrap themselves around his body and ask if he liked everything. But for some reason, Yi felt sleepy, even though his intuition told him that he shouldn't fall asleep. But as a result, Chunyi fell into a deep sleep, falling into bed. The next day at 9 in the morning, the main character was woken up by the alarm clock as always. The worried teenager assumed that he had failed the mission again and lost his life, realizing that he had acted too carelessly yesterday and had not expected to participate in Xiang's mission. He also realized why Wei kissed him, because in this way the girl gave him drugs to put him to sleep. At the same time, the young man assumed that the owner of the establishment also took part. By thinking about the clues, Yi increased his intelligence by 1 point and received a key to a certain riddle. After which Chunyi got ready and went outside wearing glasses. This time he couldn't make a mistake. The guy followed the same route, and after the noodle cafe he went to V's club, believing that now he would definitely be able to complete the task without losing lives. As always, he was greeted at the entrance by pretty girls, but he ignored them. At the same time, he noticed their blue aura, which indicated their neutral role in the mission. However, the manager possessed red energy. Chunyi realized that she was extremely dangerous. But she is also an important person for the mission, so the guy became cautious with her. Unexpectedly, the system gave him detailed information about the woman, which had never happened before. Based on the hostess's file, he found out that the highest characteristic was influence. All this time, with a puzzled expression on her face, she asked the guest why he had come. Chunyi in turn replied that he needed Xiang, then everything happened just like last time. The manager took him to the same room and asked him to wait a little until V appeared. He began to carefully examine everything in the area, but did not find anything interesting. A moment later, a girl entered the room and apologized for the delay. The main character greeted her and Xiang immediately recognized him as that very neighbor Qi. However, she did not notice any surprise in response, which caused her questions. V asked why he wasn't surprised to meet her. Yi silently studied her characteristics. Then she said the same line as before. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But suddenly Chunyi asked him to wait a couple of minutes while he washed his face. The young lady noted that he could have done this in her absence and followed him with her gaze. The teenager, in turn, ignored her statement and closed the bathroom door behind him. After which, using his cell phone, he decided to find V's phone to find out something interesting. Having learned from correspondence with the owner that they had set everything up to poison him, the task changed. Now he needed to pretend to be dead in order to understand what would happen next. However, this was quite difficult to do because the drug was in V's mouth. Suddenly, the young man opened the door and asked Xiang to pour him a glass of water. The girl agreed, because this made it much easier for her to introduce drugs into his body. V simply threw the capsule into the water and it dissolved, then brought the glass to E. Chunyi in turn took the glass and closed the bathroom door behind him again, after which he faked a loss of consciousness, saying that he felt very dizzy. Hearing the teenager's slurred speech, Xiang immediately ran to the door, after which she went inside the room and found E unconscious on the floor. Suddenly she stepped on his back and declared that all men were the same. The guy endured in order not to let himself be exposed and continued to pretend. Soon, naive Vei called someone and ordered them to come to her club to finish off the boy. All this time the young man lay quietly on the cold floor, realizing that he would now be dragged away somewhere. A few minutes later, unknown people entered the room. Xiang said that he does not smoke or drink, so he can be sold for good money. Besides, the skin is soft. The guys immediately started sniffing Chunyi and saying that it was really a treasure. After all his teeth were real and his own. And another noted that he was in good condition. Moreover, the smell of his skin was incredibly pleasant. This procedure seemed worse than death to E. The teenager literally began to beg to be killed so as not to take part in something like this. After a certain amount of time, having examined it from all sides, one of them ordered the others to carry away the body. Chunyi was at his limit, because he didn't know how much longer he could endure this bullying. Finally, they brought the guy into some cold room and laid him on a table. The manager said that they had a lot of time before taking a certain medicine, and it was worth waiting for the doctor. Unexpectedly, Xiang asked the landlady whether her debt had been paid off in this way. The woman smiled sweetly at her and replied that now she didn't owe her anything. The manager also ordered her giants not to cut him so that his organs would not be damaged. After all, they should get good money for it, especially since this time the buyers are foreigners. Soon they all left the room and E immediately jumped up from his seat, realizing that he was almost put to death. But since they didn't even bother to look after him, and were completely confident in the drug, Chunyi hurried to escape with the help of a magic rope, which he managed to do without hindrance. A couple of minutes later, the teenager went down to the street, realizing what a good thing a rope is. But as soon as E picked up the phone to call the police, the irreparable happened. The guy discovered 10 missed messages from Yezi and was horrified. At that very moment, the girl appeared behind him and put a knife to his throat, saying that he dared not answer. He also interfered in the personal affairs of her company, and the stunned Chunyi said that he did not understand what she was talking about. Then he turned around and asked if this club really belonged to her. Yezi ignored his question and noted that the boy had decided to disobey her. The main character was shocked by the fact that she was behind the sale of organs. The girl said that anyone who dared to disobey her would be dead, and E was no exception. Realizing that his life could end at any second, Chunyi decided to extract at least some information from her. As a result, he asked why she was selling organs. Yezi, in turn, was taken aback by this question and did not understand what he was talking about. Then the teenager pointed to the club and said that the manager and her accomplices were doing the same thing. The shocked killer immediately headed towards the establishment. E realized that in fact she was not in the know. But suddenly Yezi returned and called on Chunyi to tell him everything he knew about it. Meanwhile, the owner, Xiang, and the doctor were indignant about the boy's escape. At that moment, the teenager and Yezi entered their room, which no one expected. Judging by the expression on the young lady's face, the girl was determined. The doctor, in turn, did not understand what was happening and approached the little girl. He looked her over from top to bottom and declared that such a tender body would fetch no less than 20 million. After which, he tried to grab the self-confident Yezi, but Chunyi did not allow him to do so. The young man immediately stood in front of him, trying to defend the killer, which only made her laugh. A puzzled E asked her why she found it so funny. Through her laughter, the girl said that he now looked like a guard dog. At this moment, the doctor took advantage of the opportunity and attacked the young man with his fists. However, Chunyi was much faster than him and dodged the blow. The doctor was shocked by such a reaction. In connection with this, he began to look around to find the impudent man. However, he was nowhere to be found, as E had managed to stick a magic patch on him and became invisible. But not for others, so the manager ordered him to turn around, saying that the guy was behind him. When the doctor turned around, he still didn't see anyone, which led to irreversible consequences. Because Chunyi dealt him a crushing blow, something he never expected. As a result, the doctor fell unconscious to the ground, and then the owner began to help him. The woman grabbed E and began to hold him. The teenager could not escape. Then he remembered that she had more power than him, so he decided to increase his charm instead. Meanwhile, the doctor came to his senses and held his jaw. The manager ordered him to attack the youth. The bewildered doctor saw no one except her and asked where to hit. The hostess urged him to attack her in order to hit the guy. Thus, her servant delivered a powerful blow to her stomach, as Chunyi dodged it at the last moment. The woman instantly fell to the floor and began to insult her subordinate. Yezi, who stood to the side, watched everything that was happening and laughed. The doctor finally realized that E was actually invisible and grabbed the gun. Then he rushed towards the girl and pointed the weapon at her, but the young lady did not even move. The teenager understood that no matter how strong she was, no one could stand up to a bullet. However, at the moment of the shot, Yezi struck the doctor with a lightning-fast knife, having thus cut off his hand. Everyone present was stunned by this turn of events. Shang and the hostess immediately backed away, realizing the seriousness of their situation. The manager's henchman, in turn, began to cry like a child and beg Yezi to spare him. The girl walked up to him and, stepping on his second hand, ordered him to call her little lady. But the guy couldn't string a couple of words together, which led to disastrous consequences for him. But at the same time, he said that he would definitely improve. But Yezi replied that there would not be a next time. After which she dealt with him in cold blood, which once again shocked everyone. The manager and Xiang collapsed to the floor, realizing that their end was closer than they thought. The little killer immediately approached the woman and asked if she really was selling human organs. Suddenly, the owner of the club became bolder and, jumping up from her seat, declared that she would not give up so easily, adding that there is a very influential person behind her who will definitely take revenge on them. But if Yezi let her go, he would receive a generous reward. The young lady immediately took out her phone. And a couple of minutes later, the manager's mobile phone rang, and the girl advised her to pick up the phone. The frightened woman grabbed her cell phone and saw that her patron was calling her. Yezi's mischievous smile spread across her face, making it clear that she was not such a simple girl. Finally, the mistress realized that this girl was the boss, but it was too late. As a result, Yezi still killed her in cold blood, demonstrating her strength. Then she said that everyone who dared to deceive the real mistress would die. The main character glanced at the bloody corpses and was shocked, not believing what had happened. The whole room was covered in blood. It was like a scene from a horror movie. After all, the little girl really did turn out to be a maniacal killer. And at the same time, she was the boss behind the scenes of this game, which was even more amazing. At this point, a frightened Xiang began to beg Yezi to let her live, since she did not know anything. Adding that she had a huge debt, the girl nevertheless made her choice and came closer to her. After which she tried to stab her with a knife, but E asked her not to do it, because V was his neighbor. The dumbfounded Yezi glared at Chunyi and asked when he became so bold as to contradict her. The guy said that he had done a good job today and sometimes it was worth rewarding his charges. The girl again asked what he was going to do with her. The young man replied that he just wanted to free her. After all, if Xiang suddenly disappears, he might get into trouble, since many people know her. Yezi looked at the teenager for a long time and realized that there was some truth in his words. In this regard, she decided to save Wii's life and let her go, yet immediately urged Xiang to leave. But instead of gratitude, the girl began to insult him, which unexpectedly made the little girl laugh. Chunyi began to understand that they would definitely not become friends, and perhaps he should not have stopped Yezi. Soon the guy found himself at the maniac's house. She was filled with terrible fear, but he couldn't disobey. The girl, in turn, went to take a cool shower absolutely calmly. The young man had been waiting for her in the room all this time, and suddenly remembered that the system had not notified him of the completion of the mission. But what was much more important was to get out of the killer's estate alive, which was quite a difficult task. Taking advantage of the moment, Yi decided to put on his glasses to find out Yezi's attributes. In addition, some hints could be seen, but the system was unable to figure out its characteristics. Then Chunyi guessed that her level was too high, and she was really dangerous. A brief moment afterward, the girl emerged clad solely in a towel and encountered a startled teenager standing before the door. The perplexed woman asked what he was up to and why he was standing right outside the door. The frightened E was unable to answer clearly, and she did not wait for his ridiculous excuses. As a result, Yezi urged him to also wash and change his clothes, and naturally he agreed. Entering the bathroom, the guy immediately closed the door behind him and began to think about what to do next. Suddenly, the girl called out to him through the door. The young man responded and asked what was the matter. At the same time, he could not understand why she periodically called him a puppy. Suddenly, the girl declared that there were people who liked to do disgusting things right under her nose. The teenager decided to calm her down and told her that she did the right thing. Finally, Yezi admitted that she was the head of the dragon organization and her job was to eliminate those who violated the clan's rules. Without thinking twice, Chunyi asked what rules she was talking about. The young lady stated that she cannot fail to respond to messages and also engage in shady business without her knowledge. He realized with bitterness that in that case he would have to die several times. Yezi added that she initially wanted to kill him, but when he stood up for her, everything changed. At this point, the system informed the owner that the mission was completed and awarded him various rewards, and he also raised his level. The joyful Chunyi hurried to distribute 5 points in the ability tree. But, as before, he chose to increase charm by 5 points, while the other indicators did not decrease. So the teenager decided to gain the killer's trust in order to stay alive. After a certain amount of time, the overly self-confident E came out of the bathroom. The guy tried to please her in every way, and as it turned out, it really worked. After all, Yezi instantly became gentle and smiling, after which she made a request. The stunned young man agreed to let Chunyi follow her into the other room. The girl took his hand and dragged him into the bedroom. Ye didn't expect that 5 charm points would play such a role. Then the girl pushed the guy onto the bed. The main character did not dare to resist her, after which the little girl climbed on him and ordered him not to move. Chunyi, in turn, was at a loss, because in fact it was a murderer in front of him. The young lady suddenly started sniffing him, which was quite strange. But Ye continued to play along with her, and was ready to do anything. But suddenly Yezi called him to leave. The shocked guy couldn't understand what went wrong and why they didn't kiss. At the same time, the girl said that if he did not leave her room within 10 minutes, he would suddenly become ill. Chunyi was stunned by this turn of events and of course headed out, believing that once he gets more charm points he will stop getting into situations like this. Yezi herself literally plunged into her deep childhood memories, when her father was going to go somewhere, and she wanted him to take her with him. But the man couldn't do it, because where he had to go was like hell. Instead, he gave his little daughter a knife, and the girl was shocked by such a gift. But her father declared that one day she would have to use weapons to inherit his territory. Naturally, Yezi accepted her father's request, and promised to fulfill her duty. At that moment, the girl looked at her knife and caught herself thinking that E really did smell like her father. The next morning, the main character, as always, played the slot machine and got the gloves, with the help of which it was possible to copy an object that the owner touched. The duration of action was 5 seconds. The teenager immediately put them on his hands and looked at the new uniform for a long time, after which he decided to test them in action and took the glass in one hand, realizing that he no longer needed money. A second later, the same glass appeared in the other hand. The young man was pleased with the result. At that moment, the news started talking about the theft of a certain precious stone. The robbers conspired with the maid, and within 15 minutes stole many things, including the sapphire. Chunyi was shocked because the theft had taken place in Yezi's house, and a few minutes later Yezi's phone rang. As it turned out, the girl sent him a message asking him to find the stone and return it to her domain. She also ordered him to protect her territory. The difficulty of the task attracted the young man and he agreed. The system immediately notified the owner of the next mission, where it was necessary to find a stone called the Star Ocean. Having put on special glasses, the teenager rushed to complete the task as quickly as possible. The extremely self-confident Chunyi was determined and believed that everything would go smoothly this time. After a certain amount of time, E arrived at his destination, where the old man was questioned by journalists. The guy noticed a characteristic orange glow in the house and realized he had come to the right place. After all, this meant that there were some special clues inside the estate. But a moment later, the beam literally disappeared into thin air, and the young man did not understand what had happened. Then he suggested that the clue might be a moving object. But first he needed to get into the mansion. The path led through the main gate, where there were unfriendly guards. The armed thugs, in turn, demanded that the teenager immediately leave the old man's property. Chunyi noticed their orange glow, realizing that he was already at his destination. At this point, one of the bodyguards once again demanded that the youth leave. However, Ye continued to ignore them and only thought about getting inside the house. After which the big guy rushed to hit him with a piece of rebar, which didn't work out very well for him. Because Chunyi had disappeared from sight in an instant, the guards were at a loss. Not understanding where he could have disappeared to in a split second, they began to look around. But they didn't find anyone, and in the meantime E hurried to the rich old man's property. But the glow led him to unknown young people who were sorting things out among themselves. The stranger was overly intrusive and pestered the girl, saying that no one would help her. The young lady tried to run away, but the restless teenager caught up with her and grabbed her by the arm. The protagonist watched what was happening and tried to understand why the clue led him here. But first of all, it was necessary to help the lady free herself from the impudent pursuer. So Chunyi plucked up his courage and ordered him to release the girl immediately. At that moment, the unknown girl broke free from the thug's embrace and ran to the side. At that very second, she asked the guy to help her. Of course, he happily agreed, stating that she was safe and that this scum couldn't do anything to her. However, the girl suddenly slipped and literally flew into her savior. Thus, E found himself in a horizontal position, not understanding what had happened. The young lady immediately began to apologize, saying that it happened completely by accident. At that moment, the enraged Jizun called his name and, taking out a knife, said that the boy would not live. Chunyi, in turn, noted that he had a rather ugly name, and it wouldn't hurt for him to go to the passport office. This completely enraged Quan Shao, who immediately rushed towards him. However, swinging his knife, he was unable to hit such a nimble young man. He stated that at school he was called Leng Shao, which meant a little frost. After which the guy copied the glass he touched at home, and he smashed it on the arrogant Jizun's head, adding that he was extremely unlucky today. Quan Shao instantly settled down on the ground, the girl watching what was happening the whole time. Of course, she liked the young brave man, and she even blushed from embarrassment. Chunyi, in turn, noticed this and broke into a smile, then suddenly remembered the task. There was a problem, however, because the two young men were glowing orange. Ye decided to play it safe and picked up the knife from the ground and headed towards Jizun. Quan Shao begged him not to kill him. Then Chunyi ordered him to tell everything he knew about the sapphire. Naturally, Shao began to pretend and claim that he didn't know about any stone. Ye immediately swung his knife to intimidate Zun, which was mostly successful. But at the same time, Jizun stated that he was called and offered money for carrying out a certain task. And it is this person who is responsible for the loss of the precious stone, and they contact each other in the evening. But the main character was sure that he was not telling the whole story, and was directly involved in the theft of the sapphire. After which, Ye decided to hack into Shao's phone system to find out who was calling him. Soon, Chunyi released the frightened teenager, having successfully hacked his mobile phone before doing so. After a couple of minutes, the app showed the exact location of this mysterious stranger. The guy immediately went to the place, completely forgetting about the girl, whom he should have taken a closer look at. After all, as soon as he left, the stranger called someone and reported what had happened. 3 hours later, Chunyi reached his destination, where the telephone booth was glowing orange. Assuming that a certain person was about to enter, Yi began to wait for him to appear. The young man also began to hack the local CCTV system, and soon this brought the desired result, as an unknown girl with a gun was captured on camera. As soon as the stranger walked past the new building, the camera turned to follow her, which created a characteristic sound, and the young lady heard it. As a result of which, she turned around and looked at the camera, thus showing a close-up of her face to Chunya, who had been watching her the whole time. After which, the guy himself went after her to find irrefutable evidence, and he picked up a brick. But a couple of seconds later, the sound of a shot was heard, and E instinctively ducked. Thinking that he had been exposed, he began to look around, but did not see anyone. Approaching the edge of the wall carefully, the young man suddenly saw the shadow of a man. Chunyi turned the corner in an instant and dealt a lightning-fast blow to the unknown girl, who immediately fell unconscious to the ground. E was stunned and thought that she was dead. But looking more closely, he saw a bullet hole in her head. The teenager instantly backed away and hid behind the wall, realizing that she had been shot. Suddenly, the guy heard the sounds of footsteps and hid, while the unknown person approached the girl's body. Chunyi managed to notice a pistol in his hands, and the guy was also not small in size. He understood that it was better not to engage in hand-to-hand combat with him, especially since he was armed. At that moment, the mysterious stranger tore a necklace from the neck of the murdered woman, on which hung that very precious sapphire called the Star Ocean. But at that moment, the guy saw a brick next to the victim and realized that he was not alone here. The killer immediately held a pistol in front of him and shouted for the young man to come out. Meanwhile, Chunyi picked up Anna's rifle and hid behind the boxes near the brick wall. He understood perfectly well that he would have to meet the killer in any case. The unknown guy in turn fired again and ordered him to surrender. Chunyi immediately jumped out from behind cover and headed towards the killer, after which the young man suddenly fired, but was unable to hit the bandit. The bullet flew literally a millimeter from the thug's shoulder, which was very lucky for him. Then E ran behind the wooden boxes again, realizing that it was not as easy as he thought. The extremely self-confident killer noted that there was only one bullet in Anna's rifle, but Chunyi claimed that he had endless ammunition, so the killer urged him to shoot him in the head. A few seconds later, E fulfilled his last wish and shot him in the head. As a result, the unknown guy fell dead to the ground, which made the young man's task much easier. Lee's weapon actually only had one bullet, but Chunyi had the ability to copy it, which he immediately took advantage of. Thus Ye took possession of the sapphire and hurried to return it to Yezi. But at that very moment, unknown people surrounded him and put a gun to his head. Having demanded that the stone be given to them, the leader of the criminal group was the very girl he had saved from Quan Shao. In this regard, Chunyi said that he initially doubted her, but decided not to touch her. In fact, E assumed that she could cause him trouble, but suddenly the guy remembered his increased charm and decided to take advantage of it. The result was immediate, but it worked on the wrong person, as the young lady's maid instantly fell in love with him. In connection with this, she immediately went over to Chunya's side and declared that from now on he was her man. He was shocked by this turn of events, but decided to take advantage of this opportunity to escape. The teenager instantly grabbed the rifle and pointed it towards the bewildered bandits. At that moment, the previously killed killer literally rose from the dead and shot the girl, which came as another shock to Chunya, as it seemed simply impossible. The killer, in turn, ordered the protagonist and the others to immediately lower their weapons. He put the rifle away and thought that it could be the dead man's twin brother, since his body was still on the ground. So everyone laid down their arms and listened to the killer's further instructions. Chunyi also set about returning the Star Ocean to the enraged brute. At the same time, Yi jokingly noted that he had wiped the dust off the necklace and was returning it to its rightful owner. The bandit immediately opened the box and shouted that he dared to deceive him. Then he began to look closely at the pendant. Chunyi thought that he understood everything, and that was the end for him. But suddenly the big guy said that he had deceived him, because there was dust on the amulet. Everyone present immediately realized that they were dealing with an extremely stupid person. In fact, Yi copied the necklace and put the copy in the box. The girl simply couldn't believe that a hired killer could be so stupid. Meanwhile, the thug reloaded his pistol and said that their life was over, after which he shot at the wall because the teenager was no longer there. The stunned killer couldn't understand where the guy had gone and began to look around. In fact, E managed to stick an invisibility sticker on him and ran behind him. He then reached for the brick while the killer continued to search for it in vain. Taking advantage of the moment, the girl's bodyguard pulled out a gun and tried to shoot the big guy. However, the killer was faster and fired first. The outcome was instantaneous. The guard immediately fell to the ground unconscious. The young lady was shocked by this turn of events. The big guy himself said that it would be better for her not to play with him, since the consequences could be dire. Meanwhile, the main character grabbed a brick and stabbed the hired killer. The bandit, in turn, dropped the pistol from his hands and assumed a horizontal position. Before he died, he only managed to say that the boy had meanly attacked him from behind. The girl watched what was happening and stood silently opposite the teenager. At this moment, Chunyi hurried to take the weapon from the thug, since the girl had already armed herself with her guard's pistol. Suddenly, she asked why he saved her and continued to help her. He asked her a counter question: did she really want to steal the gem? The stranger replied that it was her grandfather's legacy, and she could not lose it. Chunyi asked again if she was really the original owner of the Star Ocean. However, the girl did not want to bother herself with any more conversations, and ordered the stone to be returned to her. So the guy found himself in a rather difficult situation, because he had to bring the sapphire to Yezi. Therefore, it was necessary to find a way to distract the girl and then take the stone. But at this moment, Ye couldn't help but give her the Star Ocean, which he subsequently did. Having thanked for the cooperation, the young lady took the amulet and left in an unknown direction. Chunyi knew that he had a much better chance of success if he attacked her from behind. But as soon as he tried to attack her, the girl said that they could play fair. In order to finally determine the owner of the gemstone, E was stunned by such a statement. After which the stranger took out a box with a necklace. The guy could not understand what she had in mind. Then she suddenly threw him down to the first floor, saying that they would go down the stairs from different sides, and whoever runs up first and picks up the box with the pendant will go home with it. Naturally, Chunyi agreed and rushed to the end of the corridor towards the stairs. But the girl stopped him and said that she had not finished explaining the rules of the game. But Ye was already going down the steps, believing that everything would soon be over and he would return to Yezi. Having gone down to the first floor, the young man saw a box with a necklace lying on the ground. But this was extremely suspicious, because the girl was nowhere to be found, which meant she was up to something. At that moment, a young lady looked out from behind the wall and pointed a gun at the teenager. Saying that the game was over, she then disappeared again. Chunyi immediately picked up the phone. Soon the guy found the girl's cell phone and decided to play with her a little. In doing so, he intended to turn on the alarm on her phone in order to finally find her. He also understood perfectly well that if he had rushed towards the amulet, she would have simply killed him. Then Chunyi copied the gun he had previously held in his hands and put up a fair fight. The girl watched attentively as the main character ran past her from below. She held him at gunpoint. The girl looked piercingly at her target and began to shoot at it with a pistol. The guy's body fell to the side after the shots. He dropped the box from his hands as he walked. The girl looked out the window happily at the body lying on the ground and shouted that she had hit the target. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the side and a bullet hit the frightened girl. She dropped her weapon. The main character managed to hit his rival. She was lying wounded and unconscious on the ground. There was a gun lying nearby. There was a large mannequin lying next to Chunya. The guy happily told his rival that he had lured her out with the help of a fake doll. The main character reached out to the box on Earth. He said that according to the rules, the stone would now belong to him. Chunyi looked around very carefully. He put the box inside his suit. The guy took the phone in his hands and pressed the emergency number. He told himself that he could not allow another death. He headed towards the exit of the building. The main character called the emergency services to come and save the wounded man. 3 hours later, this guy was walking towards his house and apartment. Chunyi walked into his room and placed the sparkling amulet on the nightstand near the desk. The main character fell onto the bed. He said to himself in a joyful voice that he could finally rest. Suddenly, the amulet near the table began to shake. The clock showed 8:30. Chunyi turned around abruptly and fearfully. He realized that there was someone next to him. The main character jumped to his feet from the side. The girl shouted that the puppy had a good reaction. The girlfriend ran up to the guy from behind and put a knife in front of his throat. Exie held the knife near the mountain boy. She grabbed the amulet with her hands. Chunyi swung his arms sharply and tried to throw the girl back from himself. The main character felt uneasy that his girlfriend's breast was on top of his head. He shouted to her in fear that he was going to get up now. 22. Chunyi read in the system window that he received a reward of 1 million yuan for completing the quest. The protagonist happily thought that his mission had finally been accomplished. Therefore, the appearance of the girl could have been foreseen. Exie told the guy that more and more people in her area were committing crimes. He could help her figure it out. The girl was holding a wanted poster for Pinhao. Chunyi read the poster with surprise and said that it was a missing person case. The guy read the system message in the window. He thought slyly to himself that the system would really never let him rest. The future mission reached level S. It should be more difficult than the previous one and more interesting. The main character made a sly gesture to the girl and told her not to worry. He explained to her that he always achieves his goals. Exie jumped onto the windowsill. She told the guy that she was leaving this task for him. She herself still had to do something. The girlfriend promised the guy that she would visit him later. After that, she jumped out of the window. Chunyi heard some noise behind him. He turned around and saw that the gaming machine had fallen over. The main character looked happily at the slot machine and said that it was time for the lottery. The system informed the owner that he had won and received sticky notes as a reward. The system informed the owner that he had won the straw golem. The main character held the toy in his hands and said in a joyful voice that the new item looked amazing. The guy put on his glasses and looked out the window. He wondered how difficult his next mission would be. Chunyi looked at the city and shouted in a joyful voice that he would not have to be bored. An hour later, the guy appeared on the street and saw some woman near the house. She was carrying purchases in her hands. Chunyi peeked around the corner at the woman. He decided that she was connected to the missing girl. A passerby approached the door and heard a noise from the side. She turned around displeased. The woman took the key and began to insert it into the front door. The guy ran up to the house very quickly and unnoticed. The guy looked carefully from around the corner. He realized that the woman did not look like an ordinary housewife at all. Chunyi held the phone in his hands. He told himself that he needed to observe the situation from the inside now. The program on the phone informed the guy that the signal had been found. Chunyi glanced at the device and realized that there were 4 people in the room. The woman grabbed the little girl by the hair. She angrily shouted at her to grow bigger and fatter. Then she could be sold for a higher price. Chunyi realized that he was seeing human traffickers in front of him. The man angrily hit the girl on the head and shouted that she dared to hit him on the nose. The main character looked at the phone angrily. He realized that he would not let any of the traitors go alive. Chunyi thought about it and realized that it would be better for him to lure the criminals out of the room one by one. The guy called the kidnappers on the phone and said that they had received a package. The man should come down and get it. The attacker did not suspect anything and told the guy that he would come right away. Chunyi happily thought to himself that when he broke the merchants' phones, he got their numbers and some delivery records. The man approached the door and carefully opened it. He looked around with interest. The kidnapper walked down the corridor. He told himself that his inflatable doll had arrived, but the courier had not thought to deliver it to the door. The main character was hiding near the stairs. The man headed towards the exit. He had no idea that there was a guy standing next to him. The main character suddenly jumped up and swung his club to hit the kidnapper from above. The bandit heard some noise from the side and turned around angrily. At that moment, the main character hit him on the head with a stick. Chunyi looked at the unconscious bandit's body on the ground. He realized that there were still 2 men and 1 woman left against him. The protagonist walked forward. He told himself that he could rely on the sticky notes and the straw golems to deal with the rest of the kidnappers. Chunyi. He went to the door and knocked. The stranger inside shouted to his friend to open the door for their colleague, who had already returned with a package. The bandit opened the door and looked ahead with displeasure. Chunyi realized that he needed to use the sticky notes now. They worked within a radius of up to 5 meters. Chunyi stuck a small sticker on the bandit. The man looked around angrily and realized that someone had knocked on the door as a joke. The main character slammed the door with all his might and it crushed the frightened bandit. Chunyi kicked the door with all his might. He shouted to the bandit that it was time to taste the beating. The attacker flew to the side. The man in the room suddenly jumped up and rushed at the guest. He angrily asked the guy who he was. The attacker shouted at the protagonist that he would kill him. Chunyi grabbed a small cleaver and realized that he would now have to use this new item. The main character jumped back sharply. He stood in the room opposite the man. Chunyi looked at the food dish on the table. He decided to use the golem to distract the opponent first. Then he could kill him with one blow. The main character suddenly jumped up and ran against his opponent. The bandit asked the guy in fear, "Is he really an idiot and using sticks against him?" The man angrily shouted at the protagonist that he would not be able to defend himself from a knife using chopsticks. Suddenly there was a small pop and the surprised man asked what was in front of him. Chun hit the man in the throat from the side with chopsticks in mid-flight. The attacker shouted at the last moment not to kill him. The woman stood to the side. She screamed in fear when she saw the body of her accomplice on the floor. The woman fell to her knees in fear in front of the main character. She shouted that she had a lot of money and she could give him everything he wanted. Chun turned around and headed to the corner of the room. The frightened kidnapper was still kneeling. The main character asked the little girl if her name was Pin Hao. He told her that he came here to save her. The main character asked the little girl if she had been kidnapped. Pin Hao frightenedly answered the guy that she had been kidnapped. Suddenly the woman sharply raised the axe above her head and shouted at the guy to mind his own business. Chunyi swung his hand very sharply and hit the attacker in the face. The main character stood near the table. He shouted at the unconscious woman who was attacking him that all this was stupid. Chun walked up to the table. He said angrily to himself that the kidnappers had been exposed and that it was very stupid of them to try to attack him suddenly. The system informed the owner that he must now protect the Pin Hao and not let her die. Chunyi thought deeply. He realized that the mission had changed. He realized that the criminal's accomplices might be nearby. The main character asked the girl where she lived. He promised to take her home. The guy picked up the girl in his arms. He told her that he wanted to show her the way home first. The clock showed 7 hours and 5 minutes. The main character was with the girl at his home. Pin Hao was lying on the bed under the blanket. Chunyi thought to himself that he was already safe, but the mission to protect the girl was not yet complete. The protagonist prepared to leave the room. He looked through the open door at the sleeping Pin Hao. The main character headed towards the exit of the room. He thought that someone should still be looking for the girl. Chunyi went to the door and hung a small bell on a string on the side of it. The guy looked at the door and thought that he should take precautions. There was a knife on the table and a glass of water. There was a bat next to the guy. He told himself that he was ready for defense. He could find a way to destroy the enemy to finish the job. 2 hours later, the guy fell asleep without noticing it. He was sleeping deeply. The main character suddenly woke up sharply and jumped up. He shouted to himself in displeasure that he had fallen asleep. Chunyi looked at the toy lying on the floor in the room. He didn't believe that someone had broken his trap from outside. The guy ran to the exit. He realized that he had to save the girl. The kidnappers should not go unpunished. The girl was sitting on top of the building. The main character did not notice her and ran along the night street. Chunyi ran down the street and shouted with concentration that the girl must be okay. Suddenly the guy heard the girl calling him from somewhere. He looked up in front of him in surprise. Pin Hao was sitting on top of the house. She happily asked the guy if he knew what the world would be like after death. Chunyi sternly demanded that the girl come down. It was very dangerous for her on the roof. The girl told the guy in a sly voice that she wanted to jump down. She would get into another world where there was no place for pain. The main character realized that Pinya herself had broken his trap from the inside in his house. The girl said goodbye to the guy and got ready to jump from the roof. Chunyi looked at the girl with great fear. He realized with excitement that everything was bad for him now. Pin jumped from the roof of the house down. She shouted that in the other world there would be no pain, no hunger, no swearing. The main character suddenly rushed forward. He shouted to the girl that he would not let her die. Chunyi stretched out his hands and caught the girl falling on him in time. The two of them fell to the ground. The main character screamed angrily when a girl fell on him from the roof. The pin fell from a great height. It crashed onto a large straw effigy. Pin stood up and started crying. She told the guy that it was all her fault and that he shouldn't die. Chunyi picked up the surprised girl from behind and said that he was okay. Pin turned around and asked the guy, "Is he really a wizard?" Chunyi explained to his little friend that he has strong magic. She can always talk to him and he will help her. The girl started crying and told the main character that unfortunately it was already too late. The man angrily slapped his daughter in the face and angrily shouted at her that she was living at his expense. The old woman grabbed the man by the hand and shouted that the girl was still too young to earn money. The man grabbed the woman by the head angrily and shouted that she was hiding her pension from him. The old woman shouted back to the man that she would give him the pension, but he shouldn't touch the girl. The man pushed the woman away from him and she fell to the floor. Pina, very frightened, ran up to her grandmother. The old woman was on her knees. She fearfully asked the angry man to have mercy on the little girl. The owner reached forward and snatched the bank card from the woman's hands. The man held the card in his hands. He angrily asked the old woman to tell him the code. The old woman answered with tears that the code for the card was her birthday. The owner grabbed the card and headed for the exit. He said he was going to play mahjong. The old woman was kneeling and calling her son in fear. A girl ran up from behind and called her grandmother in fear. The old woman fell dead on the floor. She called for her grandmother in an excited voice. The owner turned around and angrily shouted at the woman that she and the girl were unnecessary in this house. The girl in the arms of the guy asked him to take her to the district hospital. Chunyi put the girl down on the ground in fear and asked, "Is she really hurt?" The guy examined the girl from all sides and asked where it hurt. Pin answered the guy that she just wanted to visit someone in the hospital. The main character put his hand on the girl's head and said that he would now take her to the hospital. The main character and the girl approached the hospital late in the evening. He asked her if any of her relatives were there. Pin went into the hospital with her new friend. She told him that her grandmother was in room number 109. The man angrily grabbed the box and shouted at the nurses that they had killed his mother, and now he would never be able to pay his debts. The nurses tried to justify themselves and told the client that it was he who did not want to pay the medical expenses. The girl stood and listened to her father's words with displeasure. The man accused the doctors of refusing to admit their guilt. Suddenly, Pin jumped up and ran forward. Chunyi asked the girl in fear what she was doing. The girl ran up to the man and bit him on the arm with all her might. He was very scared. The man kicked the girl on the head with all his might. He angrily asked her where she came from. Pin turned around and angrily shouted at father that it was he who was to blame for grandma's death. The man pointed his finger sternly at the girl and threatened that he would teach her a lesson in life. The main character ran up from the side and hit the man in the face with all his might. He angrily told him that he was bullying the child. The man flew to the side after the blow. He grabbed his head with his hand. Chunyi clenched his fists and approached the girl's father. He told him that he had just met him. The main character angrily shouted at his partner that he had no right to be the girl's father. The nurses stood to the side and talked. They couldn't believe that Pin could be this man's daughter. The main character viciously grabbed the man's head by the hair with his hand. Chunyi slammed his opponent's head into the floor with all his might and threatened to knock all the desire for domestic violence out of him. The man fell to the floor after being hit by the main character. There were shards of glass around him. Chunyi turned around and happily told the girl that he had taught her father a lesson. The main character looked to the side in surprise and noticed that the girl had disappeared. Pin quietly, she approached the room where her grandmother was. She carefully opened the door. Pin entered the room to see her grandmother on the bed and informed her of her arrival. The girl saw that the old woman was lying motionless. She said in a frightened voice that it was her own fault that she did not protect her. Pin stood with tears in her eyes and continued calling for her grandmother. The girl threw herself into the bed where her grandmother was lying. At that moment, the main character ran into the room. The main character rushed towards the girl in fear and extended his hand to grab her. Pin was kneeling next to her grandmother's bed. There was a guy next to her, and he was holding her with his hand. Chunyi explained to the girl in a stern voice that she could only make her father's life easier in this way. It wasn't worth it. The main character understood what the girl's reason for attempting suicide was. Chunyi put his hand on the girl's head. He decided that he had to do something for her. Pin reached out to the bed and pulled the blanket over herself. At that moment, a note fell to the floor. The main character picked up the paper and looked at it with interest. He began to read it carefully. The main character held a piece of paper in his hands. He told the girl that her grandmother had left a note for her. Chunyi turned to the girl and asked if she wanted to listen. Pin was kneeling next to her grandmother's bed. The main character told the girl that he would now read her a message. The old woman wrote to her granddaughter that when she reads this letter, she herself will no longer be alive. The grandmother decided to tell her granddaughter the riddle of her name. Pinhao translated as sugar. The old woman wrote to the girl that thanks to sugar, very bitter medicines became sweet for her. The girl happily ran with a bottle next to her grandmother. At that time, the old woman was rummaging through the trash can. The grandmother wrote to her granddaughter that she should enjoy every day after her departure. Pin looked at the old woman's body with great fear and called out to her grandmother in a tearful voice. The system informed the protagonist that he had completed the search for the missing girl. He received a reward for this. Chunyi raised his hand to the system window and began changing the settings there. The main character put his hand on the girl's head and said that he would never allow anyone to hurt her again. The nurse came into the room. She asked the main character if he was a member of the Li Shuimei family. Chunyi asked the girl what happened. The nurse told the boy that he had to pay some of Li Shuimei's medical bills that she owed before she died. The protagonist turned around and told the nurse that he thought so. At that moment, a patient entered the door from the side. The doctor told the girl that no one had ever discharged her from the hospital. Her injury had not yet healed. The stranger returned and told the doctor that the stone called the Star Ocean was the only relic of her grandfather. If she stayed in the hospital, she would lose time and would not be able to return the sapphire. At this time, a little girl's cry was heard from the ward. The man and the girl stopped. Pin stood next to the bed with the old woman's body. She told the dead grandmother that she couldn't protect her. The stranger looked at the girl from the side. The nurses were talking among themselves. One of them said that only the grandmother treated the girl well. The stranger thought. She realized that the girl was left alone and did not know what awaited her in the future. The girl very realistically imagined how the little girl would sit next to her father's body. The man came up to the girl from behind and asked with concern if everything was okay with her. The stranger headed towards the entrance to the office. The man called her from behind in fear. The girl entered the room and looked closely at the crying girl near the bed. The stranger put her hand on the sad girl's head. She explained to her granddaughter that she should live a happy life for her grandmother. The girl smiled kindly at the little girl and said that she was not a bad person for her. The girl turned around and demanded that the man help the girl with the funeral arrangements. Fubo bowed and told the lady that he would do so. At this moment, the steps of the main character were heard. He entered and looked into the room with surprise. The main character looked carefully into the ward. He saw the girl sitting next to the girl near the bed and telling her something. Chunyi took a closer look and recognized the girl in the ward. He didn't understand why she was here. The main character became worried. He decided that the guest had come to the room for him. Chunyi grabbed the girl with his arms. He angrily asked the girl what she wanted to tell him. The guest looked at the guy in surprise. She was unhappy with his appearance. Pin told the main character in a worried voice that the girl was a good person and was not trying to harm him. The girl looked at the main character and demanded that he let the girl go to the ground. She shouted at the guy that he took her sapphire and that he is a bad person. Chunyi explained to his partner that he won the stone in a competition and that he did not steal it. Fubo suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it at the guy. He shouted at him not to be rude to his mistress. Pin threw herself on the guy's neck. She screamed for no one to hurt him. The man held the main character at gunpoint. The girl looked at the guy in fear. The lady turned around and commanded the man to lower the gun. Fubo told the lady that he would do everything. The girl approached the main character. Chunyi stood and held a little girl in his arms. The girl reached out to her little partner and asked who the guy next to her was. Pin explained excitedly that Chunyi had saved her life. The girl looked at the main character. She didn't think he had anything good. The girl's good impression increased sharply. She thought that she had misunderstood the guy. The main character noticed that the girl's relationship with him had improved. She had a good impression of him. The girl extended her hand to the main character and said that her name was Jian QQ, and that she was very sorry that she had offended the guy before. After this, the main character extended his hand to the girl and shook it. Chunyi smiled at his new acquaintance and told her his name. He thought that the girl was charmed by him. Jiang looked at the protagonist thoughtfully and decided that he was a good guy. She remembered that she needed to take her precious stone from the protagonist. Chunyi stood next to the bed and put his hand on the girl's head. Jiang decided to herself that she should use the child to get close to the guy. Then she would find a way to get her sapphire back. The girl came up and told the main character with excitement that she could help the little girl. Chunyi turned around and asked his partner angrily, "Does she really want to help Pin?" The girl wanted to take the little girl with her to the estate. There she would be able to provide her with everything she needed. Chunyi sternly answered his partner that he could take care of the child himself. Jiang handed the protagonist a large key. She told him that he could go to her house with the girl. They would be safer there. The main character realized that his partner was completely right. He remembered that he carried out dangerous tasks every day. He could not take the girl with him. The girl handed the guy the key. Chunyi told his partner that tomorrow he would take the little girl to her estate. The next day, the main character and the girl arrived at a large estate by car. They were met by maids at the entrance. The hostess came up and told the main character that she was glad that he agreed to come. A cat came up to the main character's leg from the side. He touched it and started meowing. Chunyi asked the girl whose cat was this on the street. Jiang answered the guy that her grandfather brought this cat before leaving. The system informed the owner that during the new task he must learn the secrets of the black cat and ensure his safety. The guy looked at the cat and decided that the animal had launched a new mission. A shooter at a great distance looked through a rifle sight at a cat. The main character held the animal in his arms. An unknown sniper fired a rifle straight at the main character. After the rifle shot, a large net flew towards the guy. The main character quickly fell to his feet to protect himself from the net flying at him. He shouted that his mission had begun very quickly. The frightened mistress ordered the maid Yoon to quickly carry the girl into the hall. The guy grabbed the frightened cat in his arms and ran very quickly to the side with him. The main character ran into the house with a kitten in his arms. He grabbed the frightened girl by the hand. The man pointed his finger forward and commanded his subordinates to immediately bring him the cat. Chunyi hid in the house. He asked the girl what was special about her cat. Jiang told the guy that her grandfather brought the animal to the house, but he did not tell her anything in detail about the pet. Soldiers with guns ran to the entrance of the building. One of them shouted that their victims would not be able to escape. Chunyi held a frightened cat in his arms. He turned around and told the frightened girl that it would be difficult for them to deal with the pursuers. Suddenly, a slot machine fell from somewhere to the side. The main character realized that it was time for the lottery. Chunyi turned around and looked away happily. He decided to test the new items using the slot machine. Jiang looked at the guy with excitement and asked what he was doing. Chunyi answered that he was going to warm up a little. The main character reached out his hand to the slot machine and pressed the lever with all his might. Chunyi looked inside the slot machine and saw many different new items there. He could expand his inventory. The main character carefully read the details of various items in the slot machine. The guy was looking at an invisible slot machine and choosing items there. The girl was standing next to him and didn't understand what he was doing. At this moment, there was a very loud knock on the door. The stranger shouted that there was someone inside the room. The maid held the girl in her arms. She asked her mistress in fear what they should do now. Chunyi shouted to this girl to find a safe place. He would deal with the attackers himself. The guy handed the cat to his girlfriend. The soldiers knocked down the door to the room and ran in. They shouted to the people that they were now trapped. The main character threw a grenade to the side, right under the feet of the soldiers who had run in. The commander glanced to the side in fear. He noticed a smoke grenade fall at his feet. The soldier aimed his gun at the main character. He shouted to the commander that this guy took the cat. The fighter pointed a gun at the main character and tried to shoot him. The soldier continued to pull the trigger on his pistol, but no shots were fired. The commander pulled out a knife. He shouted to the fighters that his gun was also out of order. The fighter said angrily that the guy had used some special techniques to disable the weapon. He suggested stabbing the opponent with a knife. Chunyi held a magic compass in his hands. He happily thought that this artifact could even disable mechanical objects. The main character jumped up and ran towards the soldiers. He told himself that he could kill the attackers without any problems. The commander shouted to his subordinates that one of them should try to block the door. The rest were to follow him and kill the guy. The main character suddenly appeared from the side and, in mid-flight, hit one of the soldiers with his knee with all his might. The commander and his subordinate turned around and heard a scream from the side. Chunyi swung his arm very sharply and forcefully and hit the soldier on the head with all his might. The commander with a knife suddenly rushed towards the main character and shouted that he would kill him now. The main character put on his combat glasses. He saw the blade of a weapon right in front of him. The main character held a magic amulet in his hands. He pressed a button on it. Chunyi held out his pistol and started shooting at the soldiers. He shouted that they were too slow. The fighters did not have time to defend themselves from the shooting and were hit by bullets. The surprised commander fell to the ground after the shots. He couldn't understand how the main character used the gun. Pin ran up to the main character in fear. Jiang stood behind him, worried, with her maid. The main character picked up the girl in his arms. Pin asked him fearfully if he was okay. Chunyi answered that he was okay. Jiang looked at the guy and decided that her decision not to return the stone to him was correct. Chunyi held out his hand with the phone towards the window. He wanted to know who else was left on the street. The commander ordered the fighters to stay. It was necessary to check what had happened inside the building. One of the fighters ran forward. He shouted that he was going to go and have a look. Chunyi looked out into the street. He noticed that there were 3 enemies left. The protagonist sent a photo of fighters from the street to his friend. He needed to find out who they were. Suddenly, someone jumped up from behind the main character and grabbed him around the neck. Chunyi dropped his gun. The stranger from behind presented him with the weapon and demanded that he give him the black cat. The main character shouted to his girlfriend to raise her gun. The weapon rolled under the girl's feet. The stranger angrily shouted at the girl that he would shoot her if she picked up a weapon. He pointed the gun at her. The girl let go of the cat and reached for the gun. The bandit angrily asked her what she would do. The criminal put a gun to the guy's head and noticed in fear that the gun was faulty. Chunyi shouted at the girl to shoot. The bandit looked at the girl with fear. Jiang pointed a pistol at him and fired. The bullet after the shot hit the attacker in the head and killed him. The bandit fell to the ground dead. The subordinate asked the Commander Khan in fear what they should do now. The Khan looked angrily ahead and shouted that not all was lost. He promised to return. The commander turned around and shouted to his subordinates to retreat. Chunyi looked after the fleeing warriors and said that they had escaped. Jiang asked the guy if they needed to pursue the fighters. The protagonist answered that they had more important things to do for now. The boy looked at the little animal in the girl's arms. He told her that the cat had special secrets. If they learned this secret, They would be able to learn the intentions of the people who attacked them. Chunyi looked closely and saw an orange light near the cat. He decided that there must be something there that was related to the mission. The guy looked closely and saw that the cat had an orange glow near its paw. Chunyi pointed at this pet in the girl's arms. He suggested taking the cat to the vet. The animal had something in its paw. The main character took the cat in his arms and told the girl that they needed to go right now. Pin would have to wait for them to return. The main character and his companion went to see a veterinarian. He was sitting at the table and looking at a magazine with girls. The doctor heard someone come in. He turned around in fear and slammed the magazine shut. Chunyi went to the doctor with a cat in his arms and asked the medic to check his pet. The vet jumped to his feet and headed towards the clients. He asked the guy with concern what was wrong with the cat. Chunyi handed the cat to the doctor and said that the animal needed to be checked. The vet put the cat on his desk. He said that if the animal had something in its body, the cat would have behaved differently. The doctor put several electrodes on the animal's body to check it. He said that the pet might have some foreign body. The doctor looked at the X-ray and said in a frightened voice that the cat had something in its leg. He explained that an operation would need to be performed to see what kind of object the animal had. Chunyi turned around in fear and asked the girl, "Will the cat's paw need to be cut?" Jung confirmed to the boy that it would need to be cut. The veterinarian took the scalpel in his hands. He smiled and told the clients that they would pay him for his work later. At this time, someone ran up from behind and swung a large blade at the doctor. The stranger cut the veterinarian in half with a huge blade. The medic dropped the cat from his hands in fear. A ninja suddenly appeared in the room. He cut the doctor with his blade. The ninja held a sword in his hands. He said in a menacing voice to the people that he was paid a lot of money to take this cat. The unfamiliar warrior looked angrily at the guy and the girl. He wanted to tell them something else. The ninja jumped up and swung his blade. He shouted at the people that he was going to take their lives now. The girl was scared and froze with horror. She did not have time to escape from the ninja's attack. The main character suddenly stretched his hand forward and grabbed the sword. He shouted at the girl to take the cat. Jang looked at the guy very frightened and asked what would happen to him next. Chunyi turned around and shouted to the girl that he would deal with the guy who attacked them himself. The girl grabbed the pet and ran. She shouted to the guy that she would be back soon. The ninja reached out to grab the sword from behind. He shouted at the boy that he wouldn't just run away from him. The fighter swung his blade. The protagonist jumped back in time. Chunyi saw how Ninja suddenly rushed to the side to catch up with the girl. The fighter, in flight, extended his hand to the fleeing girl and demanded that she give him her life. The main character managed to grab a pistol in his hand to shoot the attacker. The main character opened accurate fire and hit the fleeing ninja in the back. The ninja fell to the floor after being shot by the guy. The main character stood and held a gun in his hands. The fighter turned around and angrily shouted at the guy that he liked it. Chunyi looked at the ninja with great surprise and was surprised that he did not die. The gun in the protagonist's hands suddenly disappeared. He said in fear that his opponent was wearing a bulletproof vest. The ninja angrily told the boy that he would take the cat first. They could play later. Chunyi looked ahead and shouted at his girlfriend to run away. The fighter jumped over the girl and swung his sword. He demanded that she put the cat down. The girl grabbed the ninja's clothes with her hand in flight. Zhang held out the red ninja cape to protect herself from his blow. The girl swung and threw the cat aside. She shouted for the main character to catch it. At this time, the ninja swung his blade again. The frightened pet landed in the protagonist's arms after the flight. The protagonist turned to the girl and shouted that she had done a good job. Jung threw the cape over the ninja's head. Chun took advantage of the moment and created a copy of the cat. He decided to use another animal to distract the ninja and get an opportunity to escape. The main character shouted to his girlfriend that they needed to run away. The ninja tried to free himself from the cape and shouted to the girl that he would kill her. The ninja threw off his cape and shouted that he was going to chop everyone into pieces. The cat came up to the warrior's leg and put his paws on it. He began to meow pitifully. The ninja took the pet in his arms. He angrily shouted at the main character that he would die today. Suddenly, the little animal in the man's hands exploded and turned into a small cloud. The ninja looked at his empty hand with displeasure. He angrily shouted at the main character for daring to deceive him with tricks. The fighter swung and launched his blades at the protagonist. He angrily promised that he would kill him. The main character turned around in fear and saw blades flying at him from behind. Chunyi held the cat in his arms. He shouted in a frightened voice to the girl to be careful. The guy dodged very quickly and very sharply. The knives flew over his head. The guy fell on his girlfriend, his head lying on her chest. Chunyi looked at his girlfriend with fear and shyly asked if everything was okay with her. His partner answered the guy that everything was fine with her. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the side. The bullet flew past and broke a flower pot. Shots rang out and bullets flew around the room. The man asked the girl with displeasure, who was she? The bullet ricocheted violently and hit the ninja in the neck. Chunyi turned around in fear and noticed that his girlfriend named Yezi had appeared. The girl walked past Ninja's body. She told the protagonist that he really liked it. Etzi looked at the main character with displeasure and demanded that he move away from the woman. Chunyi jumped to his feet abruptly. He shouted to the girl that he had not done all this on purpose. Zhang turned to the guy and asked, "Does he know the girl?" Chunyi explained that he asked his girlfriend to help him identify the person who broke into their house. Zizi walked slowly and leisurely towards Zhang. She wanted to ask her something. It says he sternly asked her partner the name of her grandfather. Jiang confirmed that her grandfather's name was Yan Hai-san. She did not understand how the stranger knew her grandfather's real name. The warrior in the maid costume said in a stern voice that she knows everything in her territory. Lately, many mercenaries have appeared in her territory. She is busy with this issue. Etzi turned around and told the protagonist that after his photo, she finally had a lead. The girl told her partner that her grandfather was a traveling treasure hunter. Inside the cat, there is a secret from the grandfather. That is why the animal attracts curious glances. The main character extended his hand to the girl and took her dagger. She asked excitedly, "What was he planning?" Zhang shouted to her friend that all this is very cruel. The guy extended a knife to the paw of the frightened cat. The main character held a small bottle in his hands. It contained an ointment that heals wounds and relieves pain. He decided to use it for the animal. Chunyi cut the cat's paw and took out a small key. He bandaged the animal's paw. The boy said that it was better to endure a short pain than to suffer for the rest of his life. The girl stood next to the guy and demanded that he be more careful with the animal. Chunyi answered his partners that he had already finished. He stroked the pet. The main character held glasses in his hands and looked at the table in surprise. He told the girls that he got the key, but he didn't know what it was for. Chunyi on the girl. He decided that all this must be connected with the mission. Perhaps he could find other clues. The guy looked out into the street and saw a very bright beam. He shouted that he was right after all. Etzi jumped up to the guy from the side and asked with interest, "Did he find anything new?" Chunyi turned around and asked his girlfriend to take them to a place. Zizi angrily shouted at the guy that he decided to seduce a woman without her consent. The main character and his companions were driving at full speed in a car. The guy shouted in fear at the girl to let go of the knife. The car was racing along the mountain road at full speed. Below was a flowering valley. The guy shouted at the girl to stop the car. They arrived at the right place. They had to walk the rest of the way so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Khan asked his subordinate in the tent how everything went. The fighter replied that they had sent a master of cold arms to do the job. The ninja was supposed to return soon with the key. Chunyi was sitting behind a bush. He told the girl that it would not be easy to get to the right place. There were soldiers around. Z looked at the soldiers and said that they all looked weak. Zhang looked at the man and said that she didn't expect that this old man had so much power. The main character took the phone in his hands. He decided to find out what secrets this place hides. Chunyi began to hack into nearby electronic equipment using his phone. The protagonist was able to activate the wiretap through the phone on the table in the tent. The soldier told the commander that they sent another man to get the key. But they still lack the Star Ocean. Khan replied thoughtfully that Yan had given the Star Ocean to his granddaughter, but the girl didn't even suspect this secret. The fighter told the commander that the last time the mercenary failed to steal the sapphire, the Khan ordered his subordinate to find out in whose hands the Star Ocean was now. Zhang looked at the guy from behind and said with surprise that his phone could work as a means of wiretapping. Exi looked slyly from the side at the guy and thought that he knew how to surprise her. Chunyi turned around and explained to his partner that all of this was just a trick. The protagonist looked carefully at the military tents in the valley. He told the girls that they now needed to make a plan for further action. Etzi walked forward with a confident step. The guy asked her fearfully, what was she going to do? The partner said angrily that she would kill everyone who created problems on her land. The main character extended his hand to the girl. He shouted to her that she would have time to kill the enemies at any moment. Now they needed to find out the secret of the key. The girlfriend stopped and turned around. She looked closely at the guy. The main character suddenly thrust his hand forward and touched the girl's chest. Chunyi looked carefully ahead and felt very embarrassed. Exi sharply raised the blade above her head and prepared to attack the guy. He fearfully asked her for forgiveness. The main character shouted to the girl in a frightened voice that he didn't want to. Zhang looked at the guy and didn't understand why he was so afraid of his girlfriend. The girl with the dagger angrily shouted at the guy that she would spare him this time. She threatened to cut off his hand next time. Chunyi looked at his hand and said in a joyful voice that he was lucky to be alive. The main character heard a dog barking in the forest. He got scared and realized that things were bad. The soldier shouted to his subordinates that he had heard a noise. He asked them to check the area. The fighter held the dog on a leash. The soldier heard some crackling in the bushes. He turned around in fear. The fighter told his colleague that they had found nothing in the bushes. The dog barked angrily at the bushes next to him. The dog suddenly rushed forward. The soldier shouted that the dog Wang Tai never makes mistakes. The main character and his girlfriend were standing behind a tree. Jiang asked the guy in fear what they should do now. The main character stretched out his hands and took a big green root from the earth. He shouted to the girl that everything was okay. The dog suddenly rushed towards the guy. Chunyi looked angrily at the animal and prepared to tie it up. The main character grabbed the dog's muzzle and tied it with a green root so that the dog would not bark. The guy threw the animal to the ground and pressed it down from above. The dog could no longer bark. The soldiers looked angrily at the trees. Someone shouted that some daredevil had appeared and had entered this territory. The warriors with weapons ran into the bushes. Someone shouted that the guy needed to be killed. Suddenly, Exie appeared from behind. She jumped up and prepared to hit the soldier with her blade. The girl swung her blade and struck the warrior from behind with all her might. The soldiers pointed their guns at the girl. Someone shouted that she needed to be finished off. The soldiers began to pull the triggers on their machine guns, but no shots were fired. The soldier shouted in fear to his colleague that the weapon was out of order. The other soldier replied that they had more weapons. The main character held a small round artifact in his hands. The girl realized that her friend had a lot of strange devices. Ixi jumped up sharply and prepared to attack the fighters. One of them grabbed a knife and shouted that he would kill the girl. The girl jumped up and killed all the soldiers with very fast blows in flight. The warrior looked angrily at the stranger with the knife in front of him. He called her a creature. The main character looked out from behind the bushes. He shouted at the girl to leave the soldier alive. They needed new clues. The fighter swung and prepared to stab his opponent with a knife. Exie reached forward and grabbed the soldier's hand. He dropped the knife. The girl jumped up sharply and kicked her opponent in the stomach with all her might. Exie looked angrily and shouted at the soldier that he must stay alive. Chunyi approached the fighter lying on the ground. He thanked the girl for leaving him alive. The soldier angrily shouted at the protagonist that he had to let him go. They were on the Khan's territory. The protagonist grabbed the gun and pulled the bolt. He told the fighter that he had a sharp tongue. Chunyi put his gun to the soldier's head. He shouted that the prisoner must be kept prisoner. The protagonist held a weapon in his hands. He angrily asked the soldier, "Why did the Han come here?" The soldier shouted in fear for the protagonist not to shoot. He promised to tell everything. The soldier said that Lord Han had hidden treasures in this place many years ago and sealed them. The treasure belonged to two people, Mr. Han and Yan Hai-san. Each of them had their own key. The door could only be opened with two keys. To open the door, you also needed to have a gem called the Star Ocean. Jiang looked sternly at the soldier and said that he had been causing a stir lately. Zizi held the knife in front of her. She asked the boy if he knew what to do. The main character answered his girlfriend that he knew what to do. He looked sternly at the prisoner. Chunyi pointed his gun at the soldier and asked where the second key was now. The man replied in fear that the key was in the briefcase of Mr. Han's bodyguard. The protagonist read in the system window that he had to open the sealed door and help the girl QQ take the treasure. Chunyi looked at the system window with interest. He thought that the task had changed again, but the difficulty remained the same. He liked it all very much. The main character swung his weapon and hit the soldier on the head with all his might. He knocked him out. The girl told the guy with excitement that her grandfather's treasure should not go to someone else. She asked him for help. Chunyi took his girlfriend by the hand and said that he would help her get her treasures back and would be by her side. Exie came up from the side and called the main character to her. She looked very irritated. The girl swung her fist with all her might and hit the guy. Chunyi didn't understand why she hit him. The beaten guy angrily asked the girl, "Why is she beating him?" The girl angrily answered him that he deserved it. Jiang turned around and angrily asked the girl why she was beating people for no reason. Z sternly demanded that her partner take her hands off the main character. Chunyi tried to calm his girlfriends down. He told them that they should unite now and not get angry at each other. Etzi turned around and told the protagonist that he was to blame for everything. She decided to finish with the soldiers for now. Chunyi was unhappy. He didn't understand why he always got it from his girlfriend. The soldiers brought a metal suitcase to the commander. The Khan put the box on the table and asked his subordinates if they had gotten the key. The fighter told Mr. Han that he had been unable to contact the squad. It was possible that the task force had failed. The man opened the suitcase at that time and inside was a key. The Khan looked carefully into the suitcase. The soldier told the commander that the explosives were ready and they could blow up the doors. The Khan slammed the suitcase shut. He warned the soldiers that the force of the explosion of the door must be precise. Otherwise, the cave may collapse. The soldiers shouted loudly to their commander that they had prepared very carefully. The Khan handed the fighters a suitcase with a key. He said that with this key they could open a dozen locks inside. This would reduce the complexity of the blasting operations. The soldier took the suitcase in his hands. He told the commander that he would do everything. 2 fighters headed towards the exit of the tent. One of them was carrying a metal suitcase in his hands. The commander ordered his subordinates to move all the explosives to the warehouse door. The soldiers began reloading the explosives in the boxes. The protagonist was watching the soldiers in the bushes. He thought to himself that the second key should be in the case. Chunyi told the girls that if they could get the second key, they would get the treasure back. Jiang asked the boy how they could get the key. Exi confidently told her friends that she would go ahead and take the key. The protagonist grabbed her by the shoulder and said that he had an idea. Jiang turned around and excitedly asked the guy what his idea was. Etzi sternly demanded that her friend tell her everything. The main character held a phone in his hands. He told his girlfriends that they would also try to get the key to open the door and enter. The guy was writing a message on his phone. He told the girls that they would try to pretend to be members of a combat squad. The main character decided that he and the girls could lure out the bodyguard with the key. The soldier told his friend that they didn't need to take the key with them now. His colleague told him that their key was real, so he would take it for comparison. The soldiers came out to the edge of the forest and looked around carefully. There was complete silence all around. Suddenly, sharp blades flew from the side towards the soldiers. The fighter sharply dodged the flying blade. The knife flew right next to him. The soldiers pointed their pistols in different directions. They realized that they had been ambushed. The main character was holding a big green root in his hands. He shouted to the girl to get ready. The boy threw a green root at the soldiers' feet to tie them up. The soldiers looked down in fear and did not understand what was happening to them. The fighters were hanging upside down from the tree. They angrily demanded that the attackers come out. The main character stood on the ground with the girl and looked at the prisoners. He asked his girlfriend what she thought. Exi answered that all this was much more interesting than just killing. The soldiers pointed their pistols forward. They shouted at the boy and the girl that they were going to die. The soldiers noticed that their pistols were out of order, and they could not fire them. Jiang brought the main character a small metal suitcase. Inside was a key. The main character happily told his girlfriends that now they would have both keys. The soldiers were hanging on a tree and could not free themselves. The main character went aside with the girls. He told them that they needed to open the treasury. The main character, together with the girls, looked attentively at the soldiers near the cave from the shelter. He counted 10 fighters there. Jiang cocked her pistol. She told her companions that she could take on 4 soldiers if they covered her. Chunyi shouted at the girl to take her time. He had an interesting idea. The guy told his girlfriends that the soldiers wouldn't be able to shoot until he released the button. She slyly asked her friend, what did he come up with? The main character was holding a round artifact in his hands. He looked at his phone and told his girlfriends that he used it to track the movement of people in the camp. The protagonist told the girls that if they got inside the sealed door, the people in the camp would find out about it. If they took the treasure, the remaining soldiers would be sent after them. The girl told her friends in a stern voice that they would simply kill all the soldiers and take all the treasures. Jiang held a gun in her hands. She told the protagonist that she agreed with the girl. The main character threw a smoke grenade towards the soldier from behind. The warrior with the box in his hands turned around in fear. The commander shouted to his frightened soldiers to be careful and keep their positions. The soldier called Mr. Han on the radio and asked, "Should they start Plan B?" The soldier shouted to his colleague to guard the sealed door. He himself wanted to go and find out what had happened. The main character looked at his phone carefully. He said that Mr. Khan had already sent reinforcements. Chunyi rushed forward with a pistol. He shouted to the girls that they needed to neutralize the enemy, not kill him. The soldier saw a guy with girls running towards them. He told his colleague that they needed to shoot to kill. The soldiers held their pistols in front of them and prepared to shoot at the people. The soldiers were surprised to notice that their weapons were out of order and they could not shoot. The protagonist turned the switch on his artifact. It activated the ability to fire weapons. The girl and the main character opened fire with pistols at the soldiers on the move. The bullets hit the soldiers. They suddenly dropped their weapons and fell to the ground. The main character and the girls were shooting at the warriors. He counted them. How many did he hit? Suddenly, Exi jumped up from above. She shouted angrily that she had gotten the 6th and 7th soldiers. The warriors looked at her in fear. The girl very quickly struck her opponents with powerful knife blows and they fell to the ground. Etzi with her blade rushed at the warriors with weapons. She shouted to the main character on the go that they had one more important matter. Chunyi stood near the cave. He turned around and asked the girl, "What is this matter?" The girl tied up the soldiers. She decided to use them as bait for other warriors. Exi planted remote-controlled explosives between the bodies of the bound soldiers. Now it was necessary to wait until reinforcements came to the soldiers and blow them all up. Exi told the main character that he was a very skilled strategist. She wanted to blow up the soldiers herself. The main character took the remote control with the red button and handed it to the girl. Etsy did not part with the large blade. She held it in her hand and looked at the remote control with surprise. The soldier sat tied up in fear at the edge of the forest. A Han commander approached them from the side. He ordered his subordinate to go to the soldiers and find out what was going on. A whole group of fighters was heading towards the tied-up soldiers. Someone shouted that the prisoners needed to be untied. The main character looked at the group of soldiers from behind the bushes and happily thought that they were trapped. The fighters ran up and untied their colleagues. One of them asked with displeasure, "Who attacked the soldiers?" "Fighter." As soon as he had the opportunity to speak, he shouted to his colleagues to run away quickly. The girl reached forward and pressed the red button on the remote control. There was a very powerful explosion and bright fire. All the soldiers flew apart after the explosion. The Khan was very scared. He looked at his soldiers and did not understand what was happening there. The girl and her friends came up behind the Commander Khan. She told him that all this happened because he was hunting them. The man turned around angrily and said that he had been fooled by several small children. The main character came up to the man from behind and tied his hands. He told him that he started it himself, and it was not their fault. Chunyi tied the man up from behind and told him not to do anything stupid. The main character looked at the entrance to the cave. He told the girls that they needed to open the door. The man sat tied up on the ground. He shouted in a displeased voice at his rivals not to enter the cave. The main character approached the door with the girls. Chunyi told his girlfriends that they needed to get started. Jiang confirmed the guy's words and said that they needed to get started. A bright stone sparkled in the girl's hands. She told her friends that it was time for them to do it. Exi put the stone into the lock. After that, it sparkled very brightly. Jiang shouted to her friends in delight that 2 keyholes had appeared in front of them. The stone sparkled very brightly in the lock. There were 2 keyholes nearby. The guy told the girl that she needed to open the door first. The 2 of them stuck the keys in and inserted them into the keyholes. Suddenly, the chain on the lock broke, and the doors began to open. The main character stood with his girlfriends near the door of the cave. A bright light was shining on them. The main character and the girls entered the cave through an open door. The guy saw a huge number of chests. He joyfully shouted that there was even gold ingots around. Etsy held and examined the gold items in her hands. She said that there were many valuable artifacts here. The main character asked his girlfriend what she was going to do with all this treasure. Jiang happily told the boy that they would divide the treasures between everyone when they returned. The main character shouted in amazement to his girlfriend that it would be very generous for her to share such a pile of money. The main character read the message in the system window. He completed the quest and received 200,000 cash reward. The girl's phone rang. She looked and realized that it was her servant calling her. Jiang took the phone. She demanded that Fuguo arrange a truck for her. It was necessary to have as many guards as possible to accompany her. Several white trucks drove up to the cave and men in black ran out of them. Jiang was sitting in the truck with her friends. She suggested that they return home quickly. Her people would do the rest. The car was getting ready to drive away. The main character asked the girl with excitement, "Where did Han go?" The girlfriend answered the guy that the criminal was sent to the police station. Now they are returning to her home. The Chunyis, accompanied by their companions, arrived at the girl's luxurious mansion. People sat down at the table and clinked glasses of drinks to drink. The hostess put food on the table. She told everyone to help themselves. The main character swallowed a glass of wine. Exi, with a glass, approached the guy and sternly said that he was her animal. She forbade him to approach other women without permission. The girl handed the glass to the guy and told him to drink it as a penalty. Chunyi swallowed the contents of the glass and felt that he had drunk very much. The irritated girls stood opposite each other. Zhang told his partner that she wanted to get closer to the guy because he saved her life. The girlfriend approached the main character and told him not to pay attention to the Exi. She suggested that he continue celebrating. The girl was sitting at the table. She told the main character that he looked very happy. At that time, Chunyi was drinking wine with his girlfriend. Exi came up from the side. She was holding a bottle in her hands and shouted at the guy that he likes to drink. The girl started to gulp wine from the bottle. She shouted to her friend that she could help him get drunk. The girl very quickly drained the bottle of wine completely to the bottom and approached the guy. The girl kissed the surprised protagonist. Chunyi didn't have time to resist. The intoxicated protagonist said in a weak voice that it was too much alcohol for him. The main character felt a strong fatigue in his eyes. It started to get dark and everything was spinning. Chunyi got very drunk and fell on the table. He could no longer drink anymore. The main character slept the whole night. The next morning he opened his eyes and looked in front of him. The main character woke up and stood up on the bed. He stretched his hands up. Chunyi looked ahead in amazement. He realized that he had slept the whole night. The main character looked at himself carefully. He realized that he was naked. The guy looked around and saw that there were girls sleeping on the bed next to him. Chunyi realized that he was now in Chuchu's house. In the corridor, the maid was cleaning. The main character jumped out of bed and prepared to run away. He thought that he had done nothing wrong last night. A slot machine with various gifts appeared on the side. The main character glanced at it. Chunyi looked at the slot machine with great surprise. He decided to forget about the girls for now. The main character went to the machine and decided to try to win prizes. He noticed that the handle on it was a different color. Chun reached forward and pulled the handle on the machine. He decided to try to win something. The main character was surprised to read that 200,000 were needed for the drawing. He was able to save up money after the last task. The main character carefully studied the list of weapons available to him. The main character took a sabotage pistol for himself. With its help, it was possible to create a double for 10 minutes. Chunyi was very happy and contented, holding the gun in his hands. He looked at it with interest. The guy held the gun in his hands and didn't know where to prepare it. He couldn't attach it to his pants. The main character put the weapon on the nightstand near the bed. He looked at the lying girl. The boy reached his hand towards the clothes on the edge of the bed. Jiang was sleeping at the time. Exie heard some noise from the side and opened her eyes. She saw that there was a guy nearby. The main character got scared. He was still in bed and realized that the girlfriend noticed him. Chunyi was very scared. He realized that he was finished and could die young. Etsy Pro angrily hit the main character and angrily asked, "What does he allow himself to do?" The girls stood next to the guy. They angrily asked him, "What does he remember about last night?" The frightened protagonist sat in the corner. His girlfriends threatened him that he would be in trouble. The beaten Chunyi was scared. He couldn't remember anything and thought that his girlfriends could kill him. The girlfriend told the guy in a displeased voice that a man should be brave and responsible for his actions. Etsy pulled out a huge knife and headed towards the guy. She looked at him threateningly. The girl very angrily demanded that the guy answer her question. She threatened to stab him. Chunyi looked at the girls with fear and demanded an answer from them. He promised to explain everything. Zhang shouted in a displeased voice and called the guy a scoundrel. Ziji called the guy a dreamer in an angry voice. The doors opened and Pin entered the room. She asked the guy in fear, "Did he really have a fight with his girlfriends?" The main character tried to justify himself. He told the girl that he had not quarreled with anyone. The boy reached out and took his clothes from the locker. He told the girl with a smile that he was playing games with his girlfriends. The main character put on his outer jacket. He asked the girl why she was here. Pin came up to the guy with her toy. She told him that she wanted to play with him. Zhang approached the guy and suggested that they all go for a walk together today. The main character took the girl in his arms. He asked if she wanted to walk with him. Pin happily answered that she was ready to go with him, even to the ends of the earth. Chunyi smiled at the girl and called her cutie. Zhang suggested that his friend go to the zoo and introduce Pin to rare animals. A guy accompanied by girls was driving a car through the forest. They saw 2 kangaroos. The girl looked out of the car and said that there were animals fighting. Chunyi was surprised when he saw a kangaroo on the side of the road. They still hadn't reached the zoo. Zhang was driving. She happily told the passengers that there were about 5 kilometers left to the zoo. The boy read a message on his phone. Many wild animals escaped from the zoo. Chun realized that all this was not a coincidence. The car with its passengers drove into a trap at high speed with its wheel and skidded. The driver shouted in fear to her passengers to hold on. She turned the steering wheel sharply. The car, together with the girl, turned at full speed and crashed into a tree. The car on the road began to turn very sharply and strongly from side to side. The girls in the front seat turned around and looked with excitement at the guy and girl in the back seat. Chunyi wrapped his arms around the girl to protect her. He shouted that they were okay. At this time, a very loud scream was heard in the street. Frightened hares ran across the lawn. Chunyi hugged the girl. He shouted in a frightened voice that he had just heard a tiger's roar. Zhang said in a frightened voice that the predator must be very close to them. Z thought about it and said that something was wrong here. The main character jumped out of the car and opened the doors. He told the girls to stay there and protect the Pin. He decided to go and see for himself. Exie angrily shouted from the car to the guy that she would not listen to him, but would go with him. The main character carefully approached the tree. He very slowly looked out from behind it. There were 2 hunters standing in a clearing. One of them shot a huge tiger. The man told his friend that they had already seriously injured the animal. Chunyi realized that these were hunters. He did not understand why these men appeared here. The system gave the owner a new task. He had to protect the Amur tiger. The main character realized that the system told him to protect the predator that was next to him. Chunyi looked out and saw a large tiger lying on the ground. The animal did not move. The hunter picked up a huge knife. He decided to go up to the predator and skin it. The man swung his huge blade and prepared to strike the lying tiger. The main character ran up from the side. He shouted at the hunters to stop. Chunyi walked with his hands raised. He shouted joyfully to the men not to shoot. He wanted to help them. The hunter, holding a knife in his hand, asked the guy incredulously, could it be that he too had been sent away from headquarters? Suddenly the predator came to his senses and screamed very loudly. The man looked to the side in fear. The tiger pounced on the frightened hunter. The man dropped his gun and fell to the ground. The predator quickly ran up and grabbed the hunter's hand with all his strength. The man ran up to grab his rifle quickly. He wanted to shoot the tiger. A girl with a gun appeared from the side and pointed the gun at the guy. Chunya happily shouted to her that there were poachers next to her. The stranger angrily told the guy to stand still and not make any unnecessary movements. The main character noted with displeasure that the unfamiliar woman was hostile only towards him. The girl held a gun pointed at the guy. She wasn't interested in real poachers. The main character decided to use a smoke bomb against his rival. Chunyi selected a special smoke bomb for himself in the system window. The stranger handed the guy handcuffs and told him to hold his hands out in front of him. She demanded that he cooperate with the investigation. Chunyi took out a small metal grenade from behind and threw it on the ground. The grenade exploded and white smoke came out in all directions. The girl got very angry. The man with the rifle was very annoyed. He didn't understand what the guy was up to. The girl shouted to the hunter Tatsu to find the guy and not let him escape. The main character ran to the side and picked up the glasses. He told himself that he was right. Chunyi stood and watched from behind the tree. He realized that the girl and the hunters were in cahoots. The girl shouted to the hunter that this operation was very important. The headquarters needed to find the guy. The hunter suggested that his partner simply skin the animal and return to headquarters. The girl with the knife sat down near the tiger's body. She told the man that she would skin the victim and that he should guard it. The hunter with the gun answered angrily that if he saw the guy, he would shoot him right away. The main character used the invisibility skill. He ran up to the man from the side and hit him with all his might. The stranger with a knife in her hand turned to the side in fear. She realized that someone was nearby. The girl heard some suspicious noise from the side. She looked carefully in front of her. The stranger turned around and saw that the man was lying on the ground. She angrily asked Tatsu why he was lying down. The main character ran up to the girl from the side and put a gun to her head. Chunyi held a gun near the girl's head. The stranger promised the guy a lot of money. The main character angrily answered the girl that he didn't care at all. He chained her and the hunter to a tree. The guy shouted that he was taking the tiger. Chunyi stood next to the tied-up, frightened captives. He warned them that he would ask them some questions. The guy looked angrily at the captives and threatened that if they did not answer him, he would skin them alive. Chunyi sternly asked the captives, how did they know about the escape of animals from the zoo? The girl shouted to the guy that it was they who released the animals. Tatsu told the guy that the headquarters had ordered them to lure out 7 tigers and kill them for their skins. The main character was surprised when he heard how many animals had escaped. The guy turned around and heard a tiger growl pitifully behind him. He decided to heal him a little. Chunyi approached the animal's body. He told the lying tiger that an encounter with a wolf or a hyena would end badly for him. The main character took his magic medicine in a glass vessel. Chunyi poured the magic medicine into the predator's wounds. The tiger should recover quickly after that. There was some noise from the side. The tied-up captives asked the guy for help. The main character turned around and noticed with horror how wild predators attacked the hunter and the girl. Chunyi looked at the wolves with great excitement and attention. He immediately reached for the gun on earth. One of the predators screamed menacingly and immediately rushed forward at the man. Chunyi decided not to waste time. He raised his rifle and fired at the wolf. The main character hit the predator very accurately after being wounded. The wolf fell to the ground dead. The guy looked at the approaching predators. He told himself that there weren't that many wolves. He could get out if he had enough ammo. Suddenly, a huge tiger appeared behind the guy and roared loudly. The main character turned around and saw a huge striped predator in front of him. Chunyi turned around and saw a huge number of wolves in the forest. Next to him was the terrible tiger. The tiger suddenly turned around and rushed at full speed towards the predatory wolves. The tiger rushed sharply at the pack of wolves and began to bite them in all directions. The predators accelerated from the side and rushed from behind onto the tiger's back. Chunyi grabbed a gun and began shooting at the wolves that ran up to him. The guy hit the predators with very accurate shots from a gun and they fell to the ground. The main character said to himself in a dissatisfied voice that he had run out of ammo. Chunyi heard the menacing noise of wolves behind him. He realized that he would have to use a new weapon. The main character got a special gun to use to make a double. The guy put the gun to his head and fired a shot. The main character got a double. He launched his double forward at the predators. The wolves rushed forward and began to bite the main character's double. Chunyi quickly jumped back. Thanks to the cloning gun, he saved himself. The predatory wolves turned around and looked at the man very angrily. The predators turned sharply with an angry howl and ran forward towards the man. The main character pointed his gun at the predators and shouted that he was not going to die here. Suddenly the wolves all at once rushed at the main character. He started shooting at them with a pistol. The bullets whistled in the direction of the approaching predators. They hit them. The main character sat down on the ground to reload his weapon. A wolf ran next to him. Chunyi jumped up and shot at the predator. He shouted menacingly that his bullet was much faster. The guy saw 2 more wolves standing behind him. He shouldn't relax. The wolves began to growl angrily. They still did not dare to go towards the man. The main character hid behind a tree. He thought that the predators should leave quietly so that he could complete the task. Suddenly the wolves turned their backs on the man and began to walk into the forest. The main character turned around and saw that the wolves were scared and started running away from him. The guy looked at the system window with great interest. For some reason, his mission was not completed. At this time, the steps of a large predator were heard from the side. A large tiger approached the guy. The striped predator suddenly jumped up and rushed at the main character. The guy got scared. The tiger knocked the main character to the ground. Chunyi told the predator to negotiate with him. The tiger came close to the frightened man and licked his face. The surprised guy was lying on the ground. The tiger was standing next to him and continued to lick him. The boy sat next to the tiger. He said to himself that he already thought that he was going to die now. His whole life flashed before his eyes. The predator stood close to the man and continued to growl softly. The excited protagonist realized that the tiger in front of him was quite intelligent. The tiger turned around and walked into the forest. The protagonist realized that the predator wanted him to follow him. Chunyi decided to follow the animal and see where the tiger wanted to drag him. The main character looked ahead with great surprise. He could not understand where the forest friend had brought him. Chunyi came out to the edge of the forest. He saw the tiger approaching a large deserted building. The predator angrily approached the building and growled at him very loudly. The guy looked at this deserted house in surprise. He decided that there could be more predators inside the building. The main character noticed something flash in the window of the building. He became interested. The guy told himself with interest that something was happening inside the building. Suddenly a shot rang out and a bullet flew straight from the building into the person. The main character very sharply and very quickly dodged the bullet's flight. It crashed into a tree. A sniper with a rifle in the window looked at the main character and said that he was very nimble. The fighter turned around and shouted to his accomplices that the guy had managed to dodge the bullet. At that time, the fighters were loading the cage with the tiger into the car. One of the subordinates shouted to the boss that an escaped tiger had appeared in front of them. A poacher with a rifle told his colleagues that the female appeared because they had a male. The fighter suggested that his friends go and catch the tiger. The poacher joyfully shouted that when they caught the tiger, the mission would be accomplished. The hunter took the rifle and said that the tiger should be caught, but something happened. The boss looked through the rifle scope at the trees in the forest. He told his subordinates that the police had spotted them. The poachers asked their boss what they should do next. The commander told his subordinates to do whatever he told them to do. The main character climbed a tree and looked into the distance. He realized that the sniper was somewhere there. The main character was surprised to see 2 fighters leaving the building. They were heading towards the predator. The tiger growled angrily and began to approach the people. The hunters stood still. The tiger jumped up and leaped straight at the poacher. The fighter didn't have time to dodge. The poacher took out his gun and started shooting at the tiger running towards him. The man shot the predator with a special dart containing a tranquilizer. The tiger, after being hit with a tranquilizer, suddenly fell to the ground, exhausted. The poachers stood near the predator's body. The fighter reminded his friend that they shouldn't forget about the boss's plan. There was someone next to them. A man with a rifle walked up to the animal's body. He said that if they always lured the guy out, the boss would shoot him in one try. Suddenly, someone from the side shouted at the hunter to turn around. The man looked away in fear. The fighters looked to the side with excitement and noticed a large smoke grenade lying and hissing next to them. The hunters stood in clouds of smoke and got scared. They wanted to run away, but a friend reminded the poacher about the tiger. The main character stood behind a tree. He told himself that he had to find the sniper first. Chunyi ran very quickly past the building. The sniper from the window immediately noticed him. The main character was running at full speed near the trees. The shooter was watching him closely. The sniper looked through the scope at his target. He angrily shouted to himself that he would shoot the guy in the head. The main character quietly approached the man from behind and asked if he was the one who shot. The sniper got very angry. He looked away at the guy with displeasure. The main character put a gun to the sniper's head and said that now it was not his fault. The fighter looked at the guy with displeasure and asked who he was. The main character held the poacher at gunpoint. The man angrily asked the guy who he was. Chunyi angrily told his opponent that he had touched something he shouldn't have touched. The poacher asked this boy with displeasure, "What does he mean?" Chunyi answered him with displeasure that he meant his life. After this, the main character swung his arm with all his might and hit the man on the head with his hand. Fighters approached from behind in the forest. They noticed that the main character attacked their boss. The poachers grabbed their guns and started shooting at the main character. They couldn't let him get away. The main character took his magic talisman in his hand and activated it. Chunyi came out from behind the tree and walked towards the poachers. He was holding a rope and a gun in his hands. One of the fighters shouted to the guy in a surprised voice that he was the first to approach them to die. The fighter grabbed his weapon and started shooting at the main character with all his might. The poachers were surprised to notice that their weapons did not fire. The rifles were useless. Chunyi pointed the gun at his opponents and shouted that this was a big surprise for them. The fighters asked the guy angrily and fearfully, "Is it really he who did all this?" The main character threw a rope to one of the poachers and demanded that he tie himself up in order to survive. The fighter suddenly jumped up and swung his rifle at the main character. Chunyi, without wasting any time, fired his pistol at the attacker. The guy looked angrily at the poacher and slyly asked if everything was okay with him. The main character approached the fighters and tied them to a tree with a rope. The guy activated the system window. He decided that the mission must be completed now. The system reported that the tiger protection mission was still active. Chun thought about it and couldn't understand why there was no change in the mission. The guy turned around excitedly and said to himself that he understood everything. The tied-up poachers screamed and asked for help. The protagonist realized that he had to find and neutralize the organization. As long as the organization was active, the tiger would be in danger. The guy heard police cars rushing towards him through the forest to the side. Chunyi turned around in the bushes with displeasure and said to himself that the police were already here. The main character decided to quickly escape from this place. He needed to find the poachers' headquarters to complete the task. 20 minutes later, the guy approached the edge of the forest. He happily saw his girlfriends there. The girls were standing near the car. Exi opened the hood and was carefully examining something there. Etsi said in a dissatisfied voice that the car would still be able to start like a human being. Pin saw the main character approaching. She joyfully shouted that the guy was back. Chunyi approached his girlfriends and suggested that they return quickly. The girlfriend asked the guy with excitement what had happened to him. Chunyi told the girl that he had come across a group of poachers. They wanted to kill tigers and sell them for their skins. The main character asked the girl to help him find the poachers' main office. The girl approached the guy and said that he had to tell her the reason so that she would help him. The main character thought about it. He realized that he now needed to give his girlfriend some reason. Suddenly, an idea came to the guy's mind. He shouted loudly that he had come up with something. The main character reminded his girlfriend that they slept in the same bed last night. That's why he can call her his wife. That's why she should obey him. Exi got angry. She hit the surprised protagonist in the face with all her might. The girl called the main character shameless and said that he deserved the beating. Jang came up and sternly asked the guy, "When did he manage to turn into a villain?" Pin sternly asked the girl, "Is she really jealous?" Jang turned around angrily and said that she didn't need the guy. The girls prepared to get into the car. ZZ suggested that her friend leave the main character here. Jiang agreed. The beaten protagonist shouted to the girls that he was just joking. Jang shouted to her friend that he could get in the car. Chunyi happily replied that he was already running. The main character was standing near the slot machine the next day. He decided to find some item for himself. Then he wanted to go and finish the task. The guy turned the game handle on the machine and the discs started spinning inside. The main character watched attentively as discs with various objects were spinning in the slot machine. Chunyi was very surprised to see how he ended up winning special shoes for himself in the slot machine. The main character held special shoes in his hands. They added 10 meters to the height of his initial jump. They could only be used once a day. The boy looked at his new boots with joy. He was unhappy because they could only be used once a day. At this moment, the main character's phone rang. The guy reached out to take the device. The guy read a message from his girlfriend. Exi wrote her friend the address. She found the organization he was interested in. The main character arrived at the building to meet the girl. He looked around carefully. The main character looked around carefully. He didn't understand where his girlfriend was. At this time, someone unexpectedly came up to the guy from behind and put his hand on his shoulder. Chunyi turned around, frightened and displeased. He did not understand who could approach him now in such a place. Exi gestured to her friend to be as quiet as possible. He should not be seen by anyone. The girlfriend approached the guy and whispered that there was a poacher's nest nearby. They couldn't make a lot of noise here. Etsi extended her hand to the side and pointed to a large and tall building for the main character. The girl told the guy that the perpetrators were international repeat offenders. The organization was run by a group of 8 people. Igzy smiled and told the guy that there would be a meeting of the poachers' headquarters today. They could try and destroy them all. The main character, holding a phone in his hands, happily told the girl that a big gift awaits the poachers today. Chunyi held the phone in his hands. He was very attentively watching the movement of the targets on the map. At the table, the man told his partners that their skinning operation had failed. They needed to find out who was standing in their way. The man told the participants that if they did not find out the cause of the problem, the failure could happen again. There were 2 guards standing near the doors. The main character looked closely at the phone and shouted that he had found the intruders. The guy suddenly jumped up and ran forward at full speed. Tsi joyfully shouted to him that it was time to act. The main character and his girlfriend ran to the corner of a large building and looked at it carefully. Chunyi told his girlfriend that this path would be the best to avoid the guards. The main character ran up to the building. He shouted to the girl that he had jammed the surveillance with his phone. They shouldn't have been caught. A lonely security guard stood near the wall of the building. He decided to light a cigarette with a lighter. The guard heard a suspicious noise from the side. He turned around sharply and fearfully. The angry fighter walked along the wall. He did not understand where he heard the sound from. The guard continued walking along the wall. He had no idea that a girl was already waiting for him there. Etsy jumped up sharply and knocked the man off his feet with a very powerful blow from her hand. The main character told his girlfriend that they needed to get straight to the point. He suggested that she not beat people up, but walk past. Exy searched the body of the guard. She told the guy that there were doors with access control around. You couldn't get inside without a key card. Chunyi watched his girlfriend's actions closely. The girl rummaged through the guard's pockets and found the necessary thing. The girl held a small card in her hands. She told the main character that with its help, they could open the door to the meeting room. Chun was walking down the corridor with a friend. She warned him that there should be more surveillance cameras and traps around. The main character and his girlfriend approached the elevator doors in the wall. The guy and the girl went inside the elevator. She pressed the 8th floor. The elevator door began to close rapidly so that the cabin could rise upward. Chunyi held the card in her hands. She told the guy that the meeting room was on the 8th floor. All the leaders of the organization were there. Exy inserted the card into the sensor in the cabin. She asked the guy if he had thought of the next plan. The protagonist decided to force the poachers to tell about the crime and record it all. Then the materials could be handed over to the police. The girl turned around and asked the guy why he was interested in poachers. Chunyi explained to his partner that he wanted to do a favor for people. The elevator stopped on the 8th floor. The guy and the girl heard someone talking to each other on the floor. There was someone there. The door opened and the main character saw in front of him an unfamiliar man and a girl in black suits. The door opened and the strangers saw no one. The main character hid with his girlfriend on the ceiling. The man looked into the elevator cabin and told his companion that they could come in. The woman in the suit and her companion entered the elevator and prepared to go. The man walked up to the control panel and angrily noted that someone had already used it. The guard raised his gun and shouted loudly that there was a stranger inside. The girl jumped from the ceiling onto the surprised man. The main character was still hanging from above. During the flight, Exy swung her arm and hit the agents in the face with all her might. The frightened woman shouted over the radio that there was an intruder on the 8th floor. The main character decided not to waste time. He threw himself from the ceiling onto the woman. Chunyi swung his hand and hit the stranger on the head with all his might. Chunyi glanced at the unconscious guard. He angrily told himself that the shot was a little late. Someone shouted over the radio that the guards should go up to the 8th floor. After this, a group of guards with weapons ran up and pointed their weapons at the uninvited guests. The main character took the artifact into his hands and used it to disable the fighters' weapons. Chunyi turned around and told the girl to cover him. He decided to go to the conference room to capture the leaders. The main character jumped out of the cabin against the guards. The fighters attacked him in a crowd. The guards rushed towards the main character in a crowd to stop him. The fighters threw the guy to the ground and started beating him. Someone shouted that we shouldn't let Chunya get away. The fighters asked the main character with displeasure, "Where is the girl who was next to him?" At this time, Sai jumped up from the side and began to beat the guards with all her might. The girl appeared in front of the fighters and angrily asked who called her weakling. One of the guards said in fear that they had underestimated Exy. One of the fighters pulled out a gun and pointed it at the girl. He shouted for her to go away. The guard looked at his pistol in fear and noticed that the weapon in it was not firing. The main character swung his legs sharply and knocked the guards aside. Chunyi jumped to his feet. He leaned his hand on the floor and prepared to run away. The main character turned around and ran very quickly to the door. He shouted at the girl to stick to their plan. The guy was picking up the exit. The fighter shouted to his subordinates to either theirs or the main character. The guy ran into the room and then suddenly jumped up. The main character stood near the table where a lot of people were sitting. A meeting was taking place there. Chunyi stood in a large office. He told the meeting participants that they had finally met. The people at the table were unhappy with the guy's appearance. They didn't know who he was. The protagonist grabbed the pistol and reloaded it for the attack. Chunyi held his weapon out in front of him. He shouted to the people at the table that he would be here asking questions. The protagonist pointed a gun at the man at the table and demanded that he come to him. The stranger stood up in fear and told the protagonist that he could give him a lot of money. Chunyi put a gun to the man's head and demanded that he confess to all the poaching crimes. The stranger fearfully told the guy that they were ordinary people here. The guy hit the man with all his might. The main character angrily demanded that the stranger confess. The man answered the guy in fear and said that it was all a misunderstanding. The main character held a stranger at gunpoint. He asked him if he was involved in the recent incident at the zoo. The man answered the guy that it was okay to say so. Suddenly, a man in a white suit ran up from the side and rushed at the main character. The man snatched the gun from the guy's hands. He sternly asked him how he dared to come onto his territory. The stranger pointed a gun at the protagonist. Chunyi warned his opponent to lower the gun. The man did not listen to the main character's words and shot him with a pistol. A gunshot hit the main character. After that, a clone immediately appeared next to him. People around were surprised. They did not understand where two identical people appeared in front of them. Chunyi jumped up. He shouted fearfully to his opponents that only he could use the gun. The main character swung his fist and hit the man in the face with all his might. He dropped the gun. Chunyi picked up the gun the man had dropped and prepared to attack. The main character pointed a gun at the man and shot him with bright paint. The frightened stranger lay on the ground and trembled. Chunyi sternly promised him that next time he would not miss. The man angrily told the protagonist not to think that he had them under control. They were all on his territory. The stranger grabbed a large black remote control and prepared to press the button. The man warned the boy that there was a self-destruct device in their headquarters. If he pressed the button, everything would be over for everyone. The stranger angrily asked the guy, "Does he really want to attack him?" The man held the remote control in his hands. He said angrily to the guy that he could try. Chunyi thought to himself that he couldn't let the girl die. The man prepared to press the button on the remote control. He angrily shouted at the guy that this was all he could do. The stranger pressed the button on the remote control, and at that moment he fell through a hatch in the floor. The main character realized with fear that he was now trapped. The man ran away. Chunyi looked ahead and noticed how the holes in the floor in front of him closed up. The man at the control panel angrily shouted at the guy that he would get him. The woman told him to activate the device. If the guy ran away, they would really be in danger. Chunyi ran to the exit. The situation was difficult and he wanted to warn his girlfriend. The main character ran to the doors and grabbed the handles. He opened them wide. Etzi turned around and glanced to the side at the guy. She told him in a dissatisfied voice that she was disappointed. The bodies of the fighters were lying next to her. Chunyi shouted to the girl in fear that there was a self-destruct device in the building. The leaders of the criminals escaped. The main character and his girlfriend were walking down the corridor. Easy promised him that they would find the attackers. The guy and the girl walked down the corridor and saw predatory tigers in front of them. Chunyi asked the girl in fear if she knew how to get rid of tigers. The girl pulled out a blade and shouted to the main character that they could fight back the predators. The main character suddenly extended his hand forward and grabbed the girl's hand. Chun pulled his girlfriend aside. He suggested that she run away and not kill innocent animals. Chunyi and her friend ran at full speed to the exit. A tiger was running behind them. The predator jumped up and prepared to hit the girl with his paw from above. The main character turned around in fear and looked at his girlfriend. He realized that she was in danger. The guy rushed at the girl and knocked her to the floor. From above him, the predator attacked him with its paw. Chunyi covered the girl's body with his body. A tiger's paw flew over him from above. The guy looked at his girlfriend with fear and asked if everything was okay with her. She answered that everything was fine with her. The main character grabbed his girlfriend by the hand. He suggested that they meet in the room ahead and think about what to do next. The guy pulled the girl along by the hand. He shouted that they needed to hurry. Tigers were racing behind them. Chunyi turned around in fear and noticed a huge predatory mouth in front of him. The main character kicked the door with all his might to run into the room. The guy and the girl quickly ran into the room and closed the door. The predators remained outside. The girl in the guy's room asked, "Why did they lock themselves in there?" She was wondering what they would do next. The main character thought about it. He decided to tell the girl what they would do next. Chunyi told his companion that they needed to find the criminal leaders. He decided to try to do this using the phone. 5 minutes later, the girl asked her friend if he had found anything. Chunyi held the phone in his hands and said that he had checked all the cameras, but had not found any intruders anywhere. The guy looked at the map on his phone and said that there was a suspicious signal near him that was blinking. Chunyi excitedly told the girl that the signal was constantly moving. This meant that someone had started to act. The girl came to the door and put her hand on the handle. She said that she had her own plan. The main character excitedly asked his girlfriend what she was suggesting. The guy looked away. The girl looked away and noticed a whole herd of tigers. She told the guy that she would distract them, and he could run to the basement in the meantime. Chunyi jumped up very abruptly and ran forward towards the predators. The main character suddenly opened the door. He saw several predatory tigers in front of him. The girl sternly asked her friend, "Why is he still here?" Chunyi turned around and shouted to his girlfriend that he was going to run away now, but she had to take care of herself. The main character suddenly ran to the side. He looked at his phone and shouted that he checked the road through the video surveillance system. Chunyi climbed into the elevator to get to the source of the signal. He had to go down to the first floor first. The guy took the access card and applied it to the sensor inside the cabin. Chunyi climbed up inside the elevator cabin to the desired floor. He prepared to run out. The guy looked around the floor. In the left block of the first floor there was a small door. Behind it was a staircase and a basement. The main character walked along the corridor and was surprised to notice that there was a solid wall in front of him. Chunyi walked up to the wall and leaned his hands against it. He realized that he couldn't go any further. The main character pressed his hand on the wall in one place and something in it turned on. The guy was surprised to see that a door in the wall opened in front of him. The main character saw a very deep basement in front of him. He decided to go down there. People were sitting at the table. The man said in a dissatisfied voice that the tiger upstairs had already been released. The guy couldn't escape. The woman couldn't understand how a stranger could know about this place. The man told his subordinates that he was loyal to the company and was helping it kill a lot of wild animals. The fighter extended his hand to the boss and said in a dissatisfied voice that they had put a lot of effort into releasing the tigers from the zoo. The protagonist stood near the stairs and listened attentively to the conversation. He realized that the criminals had finally admitted that they were hunting rare animals. The main character recorded the entire conversation on a dictaphone and lost to the poachers with a prison sentence. The intruders got scared and jumped to their feet. Near the table, the man couldn't understand how the guy could find their secret room. The main character had poachers in his sights. He called the police on the phone and told them to come as soon as possible. The angry man with a bottle in his hand jumped to his feet. He was ready to rush at the guy. The boss jumped up with a bottle in his hand towards the main character and shouted that he would finish him off now. Chunyi shot the man with a green bullet from his pistol. The bullet hit the boss in the leg and he jumped back in fear. He dropped the bottle. The main character turned around and noticed the attackers standing behind him. Bandits from all sides attacked the main character with bottles. One of the attackers swung the bat and hit the guy on the head with all his might. The main character fell to the floor after the blow. The boss shouted to his subordinates to kill the guy. Chunyi pointed his weapon at the bandits and shouted for them to stay away from him. The attackers, weapons in hand, were heading towards the main character. The bandit swung his bottle at the guy. The fighter with the baton shouted at the main character that he wouldn't be able to get out of here. Chunyi put his weapon forward and began to shoot at the bandits. The bandits were hit by the guy's shots and screamed loudly in pain. Chunyi pointed his weapon at the man and the women. They were very scared. The main character angrily told the bandits to go away without any tricks. The bandits headed towards the exit with their hands up. They told the guy that he shouldn't shoot. The main character approached the table where the rope lay. He angrily told the poachers that they had given up resistance, and he would not make things more difficult for them. The main character stretched out his hands and took the rope. He told the bandits that they needed to wait for the police to arrive and end it all. Chunyi, with the ropes in his hands, approached the frightened boss, who was sitting on the floor. The main character tied the boss up with a rope and tied him to a chair. The tied-up bandits turned around and asked the guy to let them go for a reward. The main character headed towards the exit. As he was leaving, he told the poachers that he didn't need anything from them. The poachers looked at the guy leaving with fear. Chunyi told them that the police would arrive soon and they would end up in prison. The main character went into the elevator and went down to the lower floor. The main character stopped in the corridor. He heard some noise coming from the stairs. The guy looked ahead attentively. He heard a noise approaching him. The main character saw his girlfriend. A huge tiger jumped on her. The predator growled very angrily and prepared to attack the girl. Chunyi asked the girl in fear if she was injured. Z angrily answered the guy that it was difficult for her to cope with this beast. She sat in a fighting stance. The girlfriend turned around and slyly asked the guy, "Is he really worried about her?" Chunyi turned to the side and said that he was worried. The striped predator screamed angrily and rushed at the people in front of him. The main character and his girlfriend watched in fear as a huge tiger flew towards them. The predator ran past the guy and the girl at full speed. They both jumped to the side. Chunyi said excitedly that the tiger was very strong. The predator continued to fight against the girl. The girlfriend looked at the predator. She asked the main character in fear if he knew how to get rid of the tiger. The main character looked around. He needed to find a way to pull the girl out. The guy looked at the open door in the wall. After that, an idea came to his mind. Chunyi bent down to the floor and picked up a small, sharp piece of concrete in his hand. The main character jumped up and threw a piece of concrete at the tiger. The animal was wounded. Chunyi asked the guy, displeased and frightened. What is he doing? The tiger rushed after the man. The main character ran to the door. He turned around and shouted to the girl that she would find out now. An evil striped predator rushed at the guy from above. The main character prepared to dodge. Chunyi sat down on the ground. The tiger picked up speed and flew above him in flight. The striped predator flew into the room after its flight. The main character slammed the door behind him. Chunyi slammed the door with the tiger inside. Ziji happily told her friend that he was very cunning. The main character told the girl that the tiger would not come out soon. They had to leave because the police had arrived. The system informed the owner that he had protected the Amur tiger and received 1,000 in cash. Chunyi told his girlfriend that the police were on their way. The girl pulled the guy by the hand. She told him that she did not want to go with him to the interrogation. Exi slyly asked the guy if he was ready to sacrifice his life to lure the tiger and protect her. Chunyi answered his partner that he did not want the girls around him to suffer. The girlfriend told the guy that he was the only person besides her father who so desperately wanted to protect her. Chunyi slyly told his girlfriend that he would like to stay with her and protect her forever, but he is not her father. Etsi told the guy in an excited voice that she would take this very seriously. The main character turned around and confirmed to the girl that he was serious when he told her all this. The guy and his girlfriend were walking down the street. Exi was holding his hand and looking at him attentively from the side. Exi walked next to a guy in the evening city. She cheerfully told him that he looked very ridiculous. Chunyi answered his partner that he was an incredible handsome man.